Josh, is that Connor scurrying around there?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. I love that. Tell you what, they did that for the YMCA May Merriment while you're there live even. All those silent
Barb, can you hear me?
auction things, and so it starts, you get notes,
I
and you
can-
know that has to.
If you can hear me,
You
I
kinda
can hear
get
you
caught
now.
up in it, and you're
Can you hear
don't have to
me?
stand
Yes.
up and go watch it. And
I think
Okay.
we just got to
I
go
think
in
it's
here.
gotta, whatever it costs to get that app. it's
Okay,
gotta
if you
pay.
can hear me, we will get this meeting started. Everybody good? President, wave your hand at me if you can hear me, okay? Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to, I'm just changing my view, to our meeting. We've got a lot of topics to cover today. I appreciate everybody's either attendance in person or via Zoom. Certainly when we did our first Zoom meeting in April, I never thought yes, Audrey.
In case I need to rejoin by phone, I do not see a phone number listed for the morning session. So I need to find out if that's the same as for the afternoon session, which does list a phone number. So if you can find that out for me and let me know.
Yeah, I'll have Connor, if you can hear this, would you please get in touch with Audrey for her phone number? Okay, thank you. But anyway, when we did our first Zoom meeting in April, I never thought come November we would still be doing Zoom meetings. So, but I appreciate everybody's patience. Before we start with the Executive Planning Committee, a couple things. According to my calendar, it is our esteemed president's birthday next week. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say even more this year, we wish you continued good health and a much calmer next 12 months. So have a great birthday next week.
Thank you.
And also for the first time, we have our new student trustee joining us, Michael Perry. Michael, will you just take a couple minutes maybe and give your background to the rest of the board?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Perry. I'm from Champaign, Illinois. I went to Central High School, went to Parkland for 2 years and decided to transfer to Eastern about 1.5 years ago. This is my last semester of undergrad. I'm a political science major. After I finish undergrad here, I'm going to go to grad school here at Eastern Illinois University to get my master's in political science with a concentration in public administration and public policy. After that, ideally, I want to either go to law school or get into city management.
Don't go to law school, man. Stay away from it.
It's definitely my last option, but it's something I want to keep. But, yeah.
Oh, come on, I disagree with that.
Yeah, I had told Michael, Marty, that he might want to talk with you, that you have a great background and might be a great resource. So thank you,
Next
Michael.
week. This is not the week for me to recommend law school to anyone, I'll tell you that. It's been a rough one.
There are weeks like that. So with that, President, I'll turn it over to you for the Springfield update.
Thank you, Chair Bauer, and welcome to the November meeting of the Board of Trustees. It's great to see the two trustees that are here in person today. It's been lonely here without seeing everybody in person, but certainly understand the situation and the circumstances, and glad that you are well and all safe. And we'll just continue our business and operations, working through Zoom and MS Teams and everything else that's provided in technology to allow us to continue to have our meetings and continue our productive interactions with one another. So I appreciate seeing everyone. This is, as you know, No Shave November, and that a lot of the PC members do attempt to do that every year. Fortunately, wearing my mask, you will not be able to see whatever it is that I have that might look something like a beard. But I appreciate that. You had the opportunity last year. I don't know how great an opportunity that was. And of course, No Shave November is not an organization, but a national event for men to not shave and use those funds or monies that they save for not doing so and giving that to cancer research, particularly in areas of men's concerns such as prostate cancer. And so there are several of us today that look a little bit different than the last time you saw us. Today, I'm going to start out with our Springfield update, which is not going to be particularly long. It's going to be, in fact, quite brief. And that's because in Springfield right now, there is not a great deal of activity taking place, at least at the Capitol. The veto session, which would have normally be taking place at this time, has been suspended or maybe rescheduled, but it is not taking place. So there is no activity on the Capitol right now relative to the veto session. There certainly is work going on in the state, obviously, and the one area that has some concern to us right now has to do with the budget of the state of Illinois. Of course, in a few months, the normal session would reconvene, and we would be discussing appropriation hearings and testifying in front of the Senate and the House, of which we anticipate doing in a couple of months after the new year. But the governor has mentioned a couple of times over the last week or so that the revenues in Illinois are, obviously challenging right now because the fair tax amendment was not passed. That provides a little bit more challenge, and the governor himself has indicated that there certainly may be cuts necessary over the course of the fiscal year 22. Obviously, in higher education, that's a very great concern to us. We will certainly support the General Assembly and the governor in doing everything that we can and be a partner, as EIU has always been. But certainly, higher education is an investment in the state. And we know that the governor and the General Assembly understand that as well. And we know that they also understand that during the impasse that we're just recovering from back in 2015, 2016, and so on, that one of the most harmed areas from the impasse was higher education. And we certainly have done our due diligence in cutting back in working and creating efficiencies in higher education and at Eastern Illinois University. So at this point, we are preparing budget scenarios, as been asked of us by the governmental offices, and we will share that with the board and discuss it. Generally, the scenarios are to have a maintenance budget, and maintenance would be essentially no greater expenditures than you had the previous year, asking for an appropriation that might be a small increase for inflationary costs and contractual agreements that you have with your unions relative to salary, but that's it. No special initiatives, no greater amount of spending. So that's one scenario, and actually that's on the most positive end. The other scenarios that we're preparing is what would it look like for a 5% decrease or a 10% decrease in the appropriation if that was necessary based by the state revenues. Of course, that certainly would have implications for all universities, including EIU. Approximately 5% of our appropriation is right around $2 million. So to cut $2 million out of our budget next year, or $4 million, that certainly would have its toll, and there would certainly be implications relative to it. But we're nowhere near that time of really identifying exactly where the appropriation will fall. And there are a lot of factors that are involved between now and by the time of June 1st. And that includes stimulus packages and other things that might come from the federal agencies and a host of other things. And of course, as we rebuild Illinois through this pandemic, that will also affect positively or negatively the revenues that are generated for the state. So we're looking at it closely. We know that we will absolutely deal with whatever there is, and just need to bring that to your attention. So that's essentially the Springfield update, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Again, we won't have a better idea about what the appropriation will be until we get into March, April, and May. Hearing no questions.
Have
Yeah.
we held back 5%? Haven't we typically kept some of the budget in reserve, not knowing, if there might be action like this? I don't know if we've done that in the last year, but I know through through all the budget turmoil, basically the years you've been here, we've made that a practice. Do we have dollars in reserve for something like this?
In fiscal year 21, the year that we're in right now, after we filled the budgets across the campus, we did hold back 5%. And so we do have that in reserve in case there was anything that we might have to give back or that we have unexpected costs that we would need to cover. And that's not atypical for us, is to hold a little bit back in reserve through the remainder of the year. So yes, we do have that. And again, that would be about $2 million.
President Glassman, Chris texted and said he is on by phone, but he thinks he's muted and can't get off of mute.
I'll ask Connor.
Okay, he's in. Never mind.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris.
Good morning.
Okay, sorry, we're good.
Good. Chris, I love the blue sweater today. It's very EIU.
President Glassman, I have a question.
Sure.
Do we know what the governor is looking at for cuts wise? Do we know if it's certain that he's going to look at universities?
No, we don't know that at this time, but I can say that we know that the governor is highly supportive of higher education. He's acknowledged what higher education has gone through during the impasse, and so we are a very good partner, and so is the governor and our General Assembly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the Springfield update? Hearing none, we can go down to our second topic in the Executive Planning Committee, and that's obviously an update of COVID-19 and our response at EIU, and also the testing that we have that has been taking place, and testing that we have looking forward to the future. Our response at EIU has still remained extremely strong. And the outcome of those responses have been that we've been able to mitigate to a very large degree the viral spread on our campus. It is not spreading in our residence halls. There is no data to suggest that. There's no data to suggest that it's being spread in our classrooms, and we are doing very good. That's not to say that there have not been students who have tested positive, or employees. A few employees have tested positive, but most of that activity has taken place, that is, that transmission has been outside the campus and not within it. And I am very proud of that. I'm very proud of our students at EIU. I'm very proud of our faculty at EIU. And I'm very proud of all of our employees at EIU, our staff. This has been really a positive experience, if not difficult to wear a mask all the time and to watch your distancing and to disinfect the classrooms and everything else that goes along with our mitigation. But we are now 13 weeks into the semester, and this university has done an extraordinary good job. And there are so many people to thank for that. It's been very, very positive. And again, I want to reiterate that our students are at the heart of it, and they have adopted the requirements that we have asked them to do by wearing their masks and not being in large groups and everything else, social distancing, that we've asked of them. So that's been wonderful. At the same time, the community, the state, has not been quite as fortunate. And what I mean by that is, as we all know and follow the news, that the increase in COVID positive cases across our country is spiking, with almost the largest number of cases taking place each and every day. That record changes almost every day. And that's taking place in our nation, it's taking place in our state, and it is taking place in our region, that it is increased. We are in Region 6 of the Rebuild Illinois Governor's Plan, and it is unfortunately also taking place in our county. And we are doing everything possible to mitigate that, both on our campus and to promote and messaging appropriate behaviors off the campus. But it's concerning to us, obviously. And so we are examining it, and we are looking at that continuously, and what that means for us for right now and for the remainder of this fall semester. Our President's Council has met multiple times this week. In fact, we'll be meeting again this afternoon to discuss the question of whether or not to go completely online after Thanksgiving break. A number of universities are doing that, some universities are not. It depends upon your own university, the size of your university, the location of your university, and the resources and abilities you have to control the situation. But on Thursday of this week, Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago placed a 30-day stay-at-home order for the city. And of course, many of our students are from Chicago. And we realize that many of our students will be going home for Thanksgiving. And we need to take that into our consideration, as well as going home to other places, not just Chicago, across Illinois. Not many of our students live outside of Illinois, but a few do, and then to bring them back. This is a difficult question for us, and we have really tried to look at all factors involved in it. It would be very nice, of course, for our students to be able to finish their semester as they began it. At the same time, we have to remember the safety of all people, our students, our employees, and our community also has to be taken into consideration in this decision. We've not made a decision as of this time, but we will be making a decision very, very soon. Regardless, if we go continually online for the remainder of this semester, and this would just apply to this semester, the fall, or that we continue in the general manner of what we've been doing for the last 13 weeks, students will be welcomed to come back to EIU after Thanksgiving and complete the remainder of the semester if they wish to do so. So even if we went online, if a student feels more comfortable being at EIU and having the resources that we have available, such as the library, the rec center, our advisors, and laboratories, technology, they will still have that available to them. So this is a question, and it's a difficult question, It's one that we're taking very seriously, cautiously, but it is a question that we need to resolve so that everybody has a full sense of where we are and what is our planning for the remainder of the semester. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. In the area of testing, a couple of weeks ago we did mass testing on our campus, thanks to the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Coles County Health Department, which collaborated with us. And we identified from that a much lower positivity rate of our students and employees than the surrounding, than the city and the county. And that was very heartening to us, because that was a quantitative accountability of the positive nature of what's taking place on our campus. We have another test that's going to take place Tuesday of next week, which will be mass testing, again in coordination with the Coles County Health Department and the Illinois Department of Public Health, where any student or employee can be tested, and that will give us another metric as to how we are right now, even during this most recent spike in our surrounding areas, in our city, and in the state. Of course, we do have students that go home on the weekend. We realize that, and we know that even students, some that live in Chicago, go home on the weekend. So there's a lot of traffic coming back and forth, but it has not had a precipitous increase in our positive cases on campus. We are also arranging and coordinating for a test, again mass test, to take place either on December 1st or December 2nd. And that would be when the students return, regardless if they're returning and we have gone online or not gone online. And so that will give us a standard as to what has happened after Thanksgiving. And of course, we have a lot of resources with our quarantine and isolation spaces that we have available, and we also have a lot of choices that we can make, whether if we need to, we could have stronger mitigation and stronger restrictions placed on students for those last 2 weeks. After Thanksgiving break, there are 2 weeks of classes and then 1 week of finals, and that will be the remainder of the fall semester. So, you know, an incredible job getting as far as we have right now, and we are going to finish up strong at EIU. We're going to be there for our students. I say that regardless if we decide to go just online for their last 2 weeks and for finals, or if we keep it status quo as it is right now, we will always be there for our students and always providing the support that they need to be not only healthy, but also to be successful in their college endeavors, activities, and education. And so this is an area that we are balancing in and out. When we come back for the spring semester, we have been working with the University of Illinois, and with many of you are familiar with their saliva test. And when we come back in Illinois, we've been working with them as a partner, and we will begin at that time having weekly mass testing of students and employees. And it will be through the saliva test, and at least that's what's planned. We're signing the contractual papers. In fact, they will be out on our campus next week on Wednesday, so that we can do a run-through with just a few number of people, so that our individuals that will be conducting the saliva tests know exactly what they're responsible for, and we do have a location for it that's going to be over at Lance, and as soon as they are ready to do the saliva test, and it may even be before we break for the end of this semester. They are waiting on their EPA, EUA certification for the test. And as soon as that takes place, we are ready to go with the saliva tests on a weekly basis. So at EIU, we are doing all that we can to keep our university safe and at the same time complete our mission as an education leader and a university that cares for their students, their employees, and the success of their students, to have the greatest amount of attention and support that we can possibly do under these most unusual and challenging environment that we are working within today. So I know that was a lot, but I wanted to kind of get that in as to where we all are here on our campus, and then I'll open it up for any question. And I'll also mention that Ann, Dr. Flaherty, is the contact and control person for our relationship with SHIELD. And if SHIELD is the U of I outreach program for doing the saliva tests. And if you have any specific information, where we're going to do it, how we're going to do it, anything that you might want to ask about that, Ann is here to provide that information.
President Barb, first of all, compliments to you and the staff and the students and the faculty. It almost appears that Eastern's campus is one of the safest places to be in the state right now from COVID positivity rate. A couple of questions. When you do mass testing, what's the turnaround on the results for how you're doing testing now? And what will it be with the saliva test in the future? And then I guess the second question, which is just maybe subjective, is how much do you think the discipline of going to class while the students are on campus has helped in controlling COVID versus if we go online but allow students back on campus not having that discipline of the classroom structure?
As to your first question, when we work with the Illinois Department of Public Health, it is usually 2 to 4 days that it takes to get the results. When we start up with the University of Illinois with the SHIELD program, it will be within 24 hours that we'll have the results. Obviously, the quicker the time period between taking the test and getting the result is the quicker the time that you can get somebody into isolation, and if they've been exposed or they have exposed others to it, the quicker the time you can get them into quarantine. So isolation if you're positive, quarantine if you may have been exposed by being close to somebody who is positive. The better you are for mitigating the situation and how advanced the viral could be transmitted to others. So it really is important to get it back as fast as possible. There are some antigen tests right now, which are these quick tests that take about 15 minutes and you get the results. They're not quite as sensitive as the PCR tests, which is what we would be doing with the saliva and what we're doing right now with the nasal tests. But that's something else that we are looking at, and perhaps doing some of those quicker tests right in our medical center that we have on campus. So to answer your first question, 2 to 4 days right now, 24 hours when we come back. Our student athletes are being tested and have been continually tested with a relationship with Sarah Bush Lincoln Hospital, and I certainly want to give them my greatest thanks and gratitude for the partnership that Sarah Bush Lincoln Hospital System has provided to EIU. It has been an incredible relationship, totally awesome. And the turnaround time that our student athletes are getting right now through Sarah Bush Lincoln is about 24 hours. So it's been very, very good in that regard. To your other question about how many students are really in class right now versus online already in their classes, and of course we have the in-between, the hybrid, where some of their classes are face-to-face, some of their classes are online. I'm going to turn it over to Jay, and Jay might be able to give you that perspective. I believe when we started the semester, somewhere in the neighborhood of a third of our classes were face-to-face, in person. So certainly if we were to go online at this time, those classes would be affected. Those that are hybrid or those that are already online, which might be as much as 60% or 70%, of what we're doing right now, they might not see much of a difference. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay for his comments on that.
Well, I think, we're planning we continue to have slightly more than 30% face-to-face courses, and those will be impacted by any shift or modification. The hybrid courses themselves already have a significant online component, as well as some synchronous video experiences for the students. I think what we do know about the faculty, they've been working very diligently to sort of prep their courses, think about contingencies, and we've been messaging contingencies throughout the entire academic year.
Was that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Uh-huh. Other questions?
Realized I was muted. President Glassman, I do have some questions about how this mass testing is going to work. Maybe this might be a question for Dr. Flaherty, but from what I understand, in conjunction with the SHIELD program that the University of Illinois has, they also have an app called the Safer Illinois app that they use to help manage where students can go on campus, and it also helps them with contact tracing. Does Eastern Illinois University have any plans to implement something like that along with the mass testing in order to help track where outbreaks happen if
I'll start.
If they do?
I'll start with a partial answer, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Flaherty. There's a very, very large difference between being a 50,000 student university versus the size of our university at EIU. We have between 14 and 16 contact tracers just for our university community. And so the app that they provide, which helps with contact tracing, and of course we're a much smaller area geographically, that element I don't think is as essential to an EIU situation than it is to a UIUC situation. But I'm certainly familiar with the app. In fact, I've talked to a representative of the company that actually created that app and talked to them. But the contact tracing, we are doing really an excellent job. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Flaherty for any further comment to your question.
Yeah, I think what I would add is that we are working on a process where individuals will be able to pre-register. They will be randomly assigned the day that they're supposed to come get tested. We'll be testing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We're looking at 9 to 12:30. So we'll probably split the day in half. We'll say, please come between 9 and 10:30, or come between 10:30 and 12. And we're trying to work on a text system reminder so folks remember to come at their time. But as Dr. Glassman said, we aren't planning to use that app at this time for the reasons he mentioned. But
okay. My second question is, just to be clear, if we do purchase this, the testing capabilities, and we do go with it, this will be something that will be weekly throughout next semester too, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
I'd have a question just in regards to if we do go back to fully online for the rest of the semester, next semester, what do we do? Have we learned anything in regards to student success? Those students who came in that we thought might be at risk academically, or we're seeing performance suffer. Is there anything that we should be doing or are doing to help them from a retention and success in the classroom, given that the unique delivery?
I mean, it's a great question, and of course at EIU, we make a major investment in our students.
Right.
And our brand is based on being all in for our students. Remote education or online education is not the same as face-to-face, but our faculty are doing everything possible to engage the students and during this strange time, and we hope that it'll be just a spot of time, and then we'll be back to the way that it was. But I'm going to turn it over to Jay for the particulars of what's taking place relative to the engagement factors.
Well, over the last few months, we've actually invested a significant amount of time and energy in both developing additional sort of expertise in as it relates to online learning, as well as hybrid high-flex learning, and that includes associated technologies, as well as investing in additional hotspots across campus. So in a variety of scenarios, students will continue to have access to our infrastructure and resources. The other piece is, of course, the advising piece and the relationship building. Our advising center has intentionally sort of revamped and addressed issues around Zoom and Nomia and using different technologies to reach out and connect with students. And I believe Josh Norman will be discussing some of our specific initiatives around student success as they relate to the GEAR projects a little bit later today. But the outstanding work of folks like Mona Davenport, Tyler Phelps, just really doubling down, and every advisor being very intentional about reaching out, communicating in as much as possible. But it is a challenging time, and so we're looking at every way to access and communicate and engage with students. I think the most important things that faculty are being I think thoughtful, intentional, and recognize the anxiety and challenges facing our students. In fact, one of the ways in which we're trying to respond, we'll have a discussion today about the issue of credit, no credit, after today's board meeting, because we earnestly believe we need to be student-centered and find strategies so every learner can be successful.
Thank you, Jay. Additional questions? Hearing none, let's continue with our Executive Planning Committee agenda. And the next thing that we have, the next agenda item, is the Enrollment Management Update. This is a standard feature that we do every meeting, and the reason for that is that recruitment and enrollment management never ends. It is a continuous cycle of recruitment, retention, recruitment, and retention. And so I'm going to turn it over to Josh Norman for his update.
Thanks so much, President Glassman. I just wanted to mention, as national and statewide higher education data becomes available, I continue to be increasingly grateful for the effective work of our campus, marketing, admissions, and enrollment management team. The 10.5% increase in our total headcount, increase in our freshman class, and improved student profile made us truly an outlier from an enrollment trend standpoint on the national stage. And just to make you a little more familiar with some of that national data as it's been coming in since October, for fall 2020, the National Student Clearinghouse is indicating enrollment nationally was 4.4% below last year overall. First-time student enrollment across the nation dropped 13%, with community colleges showing the deepest decline at 19%. The most positive statistic from national data was a 2.9% increase in graduate enrollment nationally. The ICCB recently released their data and enrollment for fall 2020 for across all community colleges in the state of Illinois, indicated that it was a 37,204 student drop, with a total of a 13.7% decrease in enrollment. Our outreach over the next few years in partnership with our local community colleges absolutely needs to increase. As over 30,000 Illinois graduates leave the state each year, we are going to be looking at ways to partner with our local community colleges to create unique opportunities to keep students in state to pursue their education. The national trends, and especially the decline in community college enrollments, will no doubt be a factor as we continue to reach toward our goals in the 10-year strategic enrollment plan. With that in mind, a team of leaders on our campus will be working with me on a refresh of our 10-year strategic enrollment plan for review of PC and the board in June. As far as the fall 2021 enrollment update goes, for fall 2021, we continue to work to support and recruit a population of prospective students and their families that are experiencing a much greater degree of anxiety surrounding the college choice process, accompanied with significant virtual fatigue. Across all major categories, our applications are down, but in contrast, and more importantly, our admits are up in every category. The international graduate population is the outlier with significant growth in applications and admits. The deficit in applications over last year is true for the vast majority of universities in the state, especially as reported in incoming freshmen. As far as our strategic enrollment plan progress goes, 26 leaders from across our campus continue to meet and work diligently on this year's strategic enrollment plan and gear initiatives. It's truly humbling and was extremely encouraging to me when we met yesterday about the work that is going on to move us forward as a university for the 67 action plans we're currently planning to execute for this year's SEP and gear initiatives. We are currently at 91% of our outlined action plans complete or in progress, with 18% complete and 73% in progress. Some of the things that we've completed at this point is the final phase of our CARES funding has been executed in an effort to leverage the remaining balance for our qualifying students impacted by the pandemic. I wanted to mention this outstanding note about EIU that was discovered this past month by our marketing enrollment management staff. According to National Science Foundation data, Eastern is a leader in preparing undergraduates to earn doctoral degrees. Among similar institutions, those with a master's as their highest degree, EIU is ranked the highest in Illinois and is in the top 6% nationwide, something we should really be proud of. And finally, I just wanted to give a major kudos to the Office of Financial Aid and Scholarships and our supporting information technology services staff, as yesterday we processed over 2,000 students in packaging for next year's financial aid at the earliest point in my tenure, and this will likely be one of the first, if not the first public university to do so. And this gives us a unique opportunity for us to serve our prospective students and their families. So I'm really excited about the work that's been happening. I greatly appreciate the creativity, persistence, and determination of our campus students, faculty, and staff as we continue to work together to serve our prospective students and families through this incredibly unique and in some ways trying college choice process. And that concludes my update. Any questions?
Thanks, Josh. You always do an incredible job, and we are so appreciative of the work that you do, as well as all of the staff that you work with, and that staff is across the campus. It's not just in enrollment management, it's not just in the admissions office. It is a full army of individuals that are all working together collaboratively to be able to be in the position that EIU finds itself in today, and that is a strong, highly capable enrollment machine. And I really do want to acknowledge you in front of the board as well as your team. Is there any questions from our trustees?
Josh, I do have a question. You indicated that EIU is in the top 6% for PhD candidates. Is there one school that they tend to go to for the PhD? Or do you have
I actually have not looked at that full data set. Leon Meyer, our communications coordinator, is actually the one who was pouring through the National Science Foundation data. And that's a great question. That's something I'll look into and shoot you an email. Okay. I know U of I is high up there, but I'm not for sure exactly what that ranking looks like.
Okay. I just was wondering if there was opportunities to have alignment like you do with community college students coming to Eastern, that if we can then work with other universities for PhD candidates too.
That's a fantastic idea. I mean, line of sight is just so crucial when it comes to marketing and recruitment, and sometimes, if that student's an incoming freshman and we've got that line of sight to that university for that PhD program, that can be the difference between them enrolling with us and an alternative university. So it's a fantastic idea. Thanks so much for bringing that up.
One thing I might add as a supplement to Josh's report is that I think the trustees need to know is, and it may not be obvious, but it certainly may be, is that many high schools across the state of Illinois are not in person right now. And so the students, they're working online from home, and so they don't have the advantage of being with their high school counselors that would be helping them to make applications and to encouraging them to do so. And that's why applications tend to be down across the state and across the country. It's not just a disinterest, it's that there isn't that support behind them to get this process moving. And so it is just wonderful that our admits are up, as Josh mentioned, in all of the areas, but we want to get those applications in as well. So the enrollment management and admissions teams are working very, very hard to try and connect with these students at their home to get them to start applying at this time. And so the whole world of recruitment has also changed by the pandemic relative to what it was. You know, one that is really, just like our education at EIU, it's a face-to-face relationship that you're trying to make with prospective students, just like a face-to-face relationship that we have with our students in the classroom. And that has not been possible right now for this period of time. Last year, we had half a cycle where we were able to meet face-to-face, and students were in their classrooms, that is high school students, and they were being counseled by their counselors to get their applications in, to complete their FAFSAs, and so on. This year, this cycle, there has been no part of where these students have been in their high school, face-to-face with their counselors and their teachers. And so it's a very, very different and, of course, challenging environment and it's not just EIU, obviously, it's every university, every college across the country are dealing with a similar situation. So I'll open it up for additional questions for Josh.
This is Barb. A couple questions, Josh. One is, how have you seen COVID impact what seems to be important to students as they're looking for where to go from a university perspective? Second question is, refresh my mind where we are in looking at ACT or SAT scores in the enrollment or admission process.
Sure. I'll tell you that COVID has, impacted, the process, which, President Glassman mentioned. It's been just tough. Even just meeting with our counselor advisory board, high school counselors from across the state, and we have 9 who, give us insight and help us develop our processes, really make them intuitive. Just their frustration with the ability to reach these students virtually has definitely impacted the process. And then as far as student values, you see a lot more students valuing proximity, whereas that wasn't necessarily true before, and cost has become an increasing factor. So I'd say, from a value standpoint, cost and proximity have, been amplified as values in the college choice process in a way that wouldn't have been true, last year or the year before. And so I just continue to see that increase in conversations, and then also through our college choice data. And remind me your second question, Barb, sorry.
Let me get off mute. Second question had to do with remind me what our status is in using ACT or SAT scores in the admission process.
Sure, what we found is, we didn't have a crystal ball to know what the other universities would be doing as they all move test optional or test blind. So it's really interesting as I look at our place in the market, as far as universities communicating a threshold for guaranteed admission, we actually have the highest GPA requirement at a 3.3. Some universities in our vicinity are as low as 2.5. And so really interesting to see that variation. But we are also, I believe, the only institution that is an institution that if you provide your test score, it can only benefit you from the standpoint of scholarship or admission. And so we've got a really unique test optional process from the standpoint of if they're not admissible through the linear regression model formula that we have that considers both dual credit classes successfully taken and also the high school GPA, and they submit the test score, we will evaluate that as well. And I think our biggest difficulty this cycle for all of the 12 public universities has just been the apprehension around test scores. I think if I could go back in time, I would probably make our process a little simpler. I was just, as always, we're thinking about, how do we meet our goals and fill our freshman class and our incoming transfers with students we know can be successful at Eastern. They can come from any background. We want the class to be inclusive and diverse, but we also want to make sure that they have the greatest potential for success. And test optional has just been a way for us to look at other factors besides, just their test score and their GPA to determine their propensity to succeed. And so it's been a great process. If I would have had a crystal ball, I probably would have done it differently. But I think we're in a good place with our freshman admits and our transfer admits being up. But definitely a 9-day difference between what we were doing last year and this year.
It seems to me that to think about everyone's got the same challenge of trying to break through and have their voice heard within the high schools. But just thinking about the momentum we have and the relationships created, I'm so grateful that we've had Josh and Kelly Miller's leadership to put us in the position where we are. So that's already established, and we aren't trying to recover like a lot of other universities are. And you think about the value, that's the strength of our story, and then proximity, all the efforts that Josh has put into building relationships, 60-mile radius from campus, and what we've seen on enrollment. It just seems like, as difficult a time as it is, momentum in these times is working for us. And I'm very grateful for that. And it seems like Josh's job's pretty easy to me. I guess that's my final comment.
You're killing me. You got me with that last Board of Trustees. The university sells its stuff. I'm going to be out of a job before we know.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Any additional questions for Josh on his enrollment management update? Josh, thank you. Great job as always. Our next agenda item is a proposed revision to board regulation. I'll turn it over to Laura to present this item to the trustees.
Thank you. Good morning.
President, maybe I can a little bit of background quick too, since I had some discussion with the trustees individually. This is, if you remember, we have in the past approved a % on the athletic budget after the fact. And I think in some earlier individual discussions, we talked about, we really approved dollars at budget time. And so why is it necessary for that secondary approval? And it seemed to be something that was just historical and wasn't necessarily providing a lot of value. So I had asked the president and Laura to look at what it would take to change that. So this is a follow-up to that discussion.
Wow,
Laura?
Barb, you just made my job even more easier here. Thank you. I looked into the background of why we even have this regulation. It's a legacy regulation from the Board of Governors. And we in Chicago State are the only ones that really still had it in the books. So removing it at this time is not inappropriate. If you look at page 11, you'll see the recommended change. We would just be deleting the language after state appropriations may be used to support the intercollegiate athletics program. So that will be brought back to you as a first reading during the board meeting this afternoon. Are there any questions?
Laura, for Michael's benefit, can you kind of go through that there's a first reading and a second reading, just how that works before there's an approval?
Right, so for every change to the board's regulations and policies, the process is that that we will have a first reading, hear any comments that anyone has, and then the next meeting would be a second reading, and at that time, the board can take action if it feels it's appropriate. So today is actually not an action item, it's just a reading that'll occur.
So do any of the trustees have questions regarding this, or any background or anything you want answered?
Thank you.
Hello. Yep, looks like we're good to go for the first reading.
And the last item that we have in the Executive Planning Committee has to do with the trustee training that just took place a week or so back. Chair Bauer thought that it would be a good idea to have the trustees debrief. Not all of the trustees were able to attend the training, as well as any discussion that was that emanates from the trustee training that the trustees would like to discuss with the President's Council. So I'm going to turn it over to Chair Bauer.
Thanks. I was on the Zoom call. I'll start and anybody else can jump in that was on the call, or if you weren't, if you have any questions. I think this format, I was a little worried about the Zoom format and how well it would work from an educational perspective, but actually they handled the logistics extremely well. I thought there was fairly good engagement with the format. The breakout sessions were good. I just wish there had been more trustees in each breakout. Like generally my breakouts only had 3 people. So if you had one that was a little bit on the quiet side, it just became a dialogue between 2 people. I had one that was extremely good that had a student trustee in it who really brought a lot of insight to the discussion. So I thought that was good. It was obvious that from the governor's perspective and just overall the right thing to do, but there's a real focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, those types of topics. And so I think going forward, that's something we may want to drill down on a little bit more with President and Leadership Council to make sure we hear a lot about it, but to make sure maybe we see it all in one place, in one plan, to know all of the activities that are going on across campus. So maybe even as we go into our June planning session, that might be an area we may want to focus on, because it's just obvious. Again, it's the right thing to do for Eastern and our students, but it's also something you can see coming down from the governor as something that's very, very important to him. I think another good thing they did, instead of having nothing about Marty or Laura, instead of just having an outside attorney speak about some of the governance activities, they had university general counsels talking in that session, which I found better than maybe what we had had in the past. So bringing in actually university related people into some of the speaking roles I thought was good too. So Joyce, I know you were there and had some input. What would you add?
I think you covered a lot. One of the first sessions in the morning on diversity was very good. The presenter was very dynamic, did a great job in engaging, I think, the audience, even though we were virtual and watching. I agree with your comments on the breakout sessions. There was one that I had too that had a great student representative, and she made a lot of good points regarding her experience at her university. I think if anybody has an opportunity to take a look at the slides, if you didn't attend, they're available to everybody off of the website, and has some good information.
Okay, Chris, were you there? Were you?
Yes.
And what,
I was there. Go ahead, Barb. Sorry.
Any additional comments or?
Yeah, no.
Insights?
Right. I think you covered a lot. Like Joyce said, that first presentation was very good. It was very insightful. I think one thing that we should also do is how she presented some of those metrics when we're talking about closing equity gaps. that's something that we really need to be working on, and how to present that data in a different way so that we can kind of analyze that, not only from a university perspective, from a board perspective, to see where those equity gaps are, and just our responsibility as a university to try and start at a baseline and then try and go from there. So that's one of the things that she talked about. Like Joyce mentioned, those slides, that presentation should be out there and available. I thought it was a great presentation. But when you see those numbers and when you see the equity gaps that are out there for the state of Illinois, and it's surprising just to see some of that data that she had presented. So hopefully we can work towards seeing how our university stacks up and ranks, and make improvements from there. The only other, like Barb had mentioned, the breakout sessions were good. They were just short. If you had a long-winded person, they kind of took up like 5-6 minutes, and then all of a sudden you're back. It would have been nice to have a little bit more time to speak with those individuals and really get different perspectives from different universities. And I think just for the overall, I thought it was great just how well they did being on a Zoom meeting or being on a WebEx platform. Very informative. It moved along fairly quickly. So that's just my feedback. But the one takeaway I would say was just those metrics that we need to take a look at that, and how we present our metrics to look at how we stack up against equity in respect to education, and what our university stack ranks against other universities in the area. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, this is PJ. Sorry, I kind of muted myself or something, but I just wanted to add that I thought there might have been more conversation around COVID and how people are responding to that on their campuses, or if there were any, neat things that people have found that worked with, morale for students or for faculty and staff and some of that. So those are some of the things that I would have liked to hear a little bit more about, at least within the committees, to find out if there's, are there things going on other campuses that maybe we haven't heard of, or, that just in response. But I thought it was a great conference overall.
Thanks, PJ.
Hey, PJ, good thing that you mentioned that, because we did have it wasn't planned, but we one of our breakout sessions just kind of evolved into talking about into a COVID discussion. And so I think one of the things that a lot of the universities or the representatives that said that they were waiting on was just U of I to put out that rapid test, so a lot of universities could start testing a little bit more. So I think that's kind of where a lot of people were at, is just waiting for U of I to get that rapid test available. But it kind of was a spontaneous discussion about COVID, and I was meeting with I had a person from U of I and then one from Carbondale and Northeastern, and I think a lot of what they said is that they were just kind of waiting for that rapid test to come out.
Other comments about the conference itself or feedback? Again, so President, I think to your question, I think Eastern's doing a lot in these areas, but it would be good to be able to pull the data together, as Chris said, the analytics, and then also see what plans we have and all in one spot to impact those underlying analytics. So if we could plan that for a future board meeting, maybe even included in a deep dive in our strategic planning in June.
I think that would be fine. As we talked on the phone the other day, we are pretty decentralized at EIU relative to the various initiatives and who are leading the initiatives towards inclusion, diversity, and equity. And so to try and pull them all together, I think, is an outstanding idea. And to have that as an item for our June meeting and our retreat, perhaps, I think that would be a wonderful central focus. As I think all the trustees know, the IBHE right now is going through a strategic planning process. And the area of equity gaps, achievement gaps, I mean, that is a primary focus that they seem to be working towards on this strategic plan. And so I imagine that once they complete that plan, there will be a great deal of discussion between the universities. We are always interested in improving our ability to reduce the equity gap and to reduce achievement gaps, whether they're based on race or gender or anything else, first generation. And their data is excellent, just as you said. Where they got that data was from us. They requested from all of the universities to provide a whole host of data from our institutional research, and then they put together and collated the data in the fashion that you saw it, and they shared it with us. We had a meeting with IBHE, and it was really nice to see the data so well presented and so well able to be benchmarked from that point. And so as we move forward, and we're going to talk about some of our equity initiatives later on this morning, when we talk about our GEAR funding and the initiatives associated with that, that is clearly marketed towards equity improvement and reducing the achievement gaps and the equity gaps that we see on campus. So this is going to be a big, big issue over the next 4, 5, 6 years, with the hope that we will be able to, and when I say we, the universities in Illinois, to be able to close those gaps to a significant level. And we look forward to participating. In some ways, I have to say that resources are important to be able to do this. And as we'll talk about with the GEAR money, we're going to be doing a phenomenal amount of work with the $1 million or so that we've been provided in order for this particular initiative. But that money goes away, after this year. In fact, it has to be spent, I believe, by September, if I'm not mistaken. And so, we could also need some help, either through our foundation, our own foundation, by raising funds for equity purposes, in improving the equity and achievement or lowering the gaps, and that may be one way that we can help in this continuous regard. And also we need to look towards the state and towards the federal government for grants and other possibilities that would help us move forward. So there is resources that need to be attached to it, but we're a full player in this. We've always said that any student who comes to EIU, we essentially recruit them because we know that they can be successful and that we are going to make this major investment in them, and we're going to do everything possible to make them succeed or to have them succeed. And with that in place, that should be exclusive of gender, race, or any other condition. That everybody should have that equal chance, and there shouldn't be these equity issues that are outstanding, that for some individuals they have a more difficult time being able to be successful and to, of course, graduate and live their dream. And that's what we're trying to do. That's our mission as a university.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, I think this would be a great topic for our June, to kind of center the June strategy planning around.
Let's plan on it.
Okay.
That ends the Executive Planning Committee, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Bauer.
Yeah, so I think we'll go ahead, if it's okay, with finance and then take a break after finance. How's that sound?
Perfect.
Okay, then finance it is.
Okay, and then I'm going to turn everything over to Paul.
Well, I'll start us out this morning, and the first item on the agenda is the finalization of the 2021 fiscal year budget. In June, we brought a preliminary draft of the budget to you. We used that to begin the fiscal year, and now we are in a better place to give you the information that you need to make those decisions. Probably ought to look and tell you what page we're on in the, on page 7 in your book is the budget document. We are proposing a $41 million flat state appropriation. We have a small increase in tuition and fees. That is primarily due, and I'm assuming that the President has disseminated this information to you, but this is the first time since about 2006 that we've had a credit hour increase on campus. So that has then generated an increase in revenues. So it's a very good sign for all the things Josh and the President and everybody has been working on in the way of enrollment. You will notice that miscellaneous income is down significantly from last year. That was a one-time thing back in 20 where we had a large amount of excess funds. If you remember, in the LAC guidelines, the Legislative Audit Commission guidelines, that there is a calculation that we must go through every year in the what we call the local funds. And when an entity has more money than is calculated by their formula, then that money must be turned over to the income fund. And so there was about a $5 million transfer in 2020 to the income fund. The President likes that because that means that there's additional money in the appropriated and income funds. However, it does take that money away from the units that are using it in their local funds. Local funds are primarily fees paid by students, and the calculation is generally the highest month worth of expenditures plus accounts payable. So you go through that at the end of every year and you look to see what the highest month of expenditures are, and you add any accounts payable, and that's what you're allowed to keep for the next year. Is it fair to those who have been judicious and saved money throughout the year? No. But this is the rules of the state of Illinois under which we live, and so we follow through on that. Waivers still remain about the same. The issue with waivers is that as enrollment goes up, many of those waivers are specific to the type of student or the level of achievement that they bring to the table. And so many of those waivers are not subject to discussion. They are already in the formula. And as our enrollment grows, that waiver number will grow, the way those are structured. We are presenting then a balanced budget for appropriated. If you go to page 9, you will see the breakdown of those expenditures. The single largest increase is in the personnel expenditures, and that's primarily due to contractual relationships that we have with the various unions around campus. Other things that I'll note, and you can compare to actual, In 2020, we ended up being over in utilities, which was the first time in quite a few years. Will we be able to hold the line in 2021? May be a difficult situation because we are running our HVAC systems at maximum capacity right now to recirculate the air, to move the air through the buildings and reduce the chance that any virus could hang around for very long. And I think the rest of the things are pretty much in line with what we have looked at before. On the non-appropriated side, I'm back on page 7. The non-appropriated include the local funds, the funds that I just talked about, primarily student fees, revenue bond, the monies that are used to operate housing, dining, the union, student rec, and textbook rental library. And then the last item of significance in here would be the grant and gift area that is also included in non-appropriated revenues. That then accounts for, on line I, all of those federal awards for financial aid, and truly the single, or just about the largest item in this category. Certainly housing and dining then also factors in. The housing and dining operation is still, at this point, and housing and dining and the union are still predicting deficits within their budgets for FY21. There are fund balances available to offset that, and on line N, we have transferred in $1,597,000 to cover the deficit that is budgeted into this document. So with that, then we show a total of appropriation and expenditures with the transfer in that will balance the non-appropriated area for FY21. And on page 10, you will see then the expenditures as they are lined out. Certainly the single largest item is the personnel services, and you see there the increase, a similar increase to what we see in appropriated funds for the non-appropriated. Other items, scholarships and awards, primarily due to some of the federal programs are going down. And then utilities, we split the utilities. There's about $6 million on the appropriate side, about $6 million on the revenue bond side. We're anticipating then a small increase in those for 2021. Are there questions?
I do have a question, Paul. On the non-appropriated revenues, there's around 18 mil for federal and other grants. How does that relate to the line item expense for scholarships and awards, which is less than the 18?
There are a number of items in the federal awards that are classified differently for the expenditures. So those are considered to be revenues, the 18 million. Some of the scholarship and awards are in the 13 category, the scholarship and awards category, 13 million, and then some are in contractual services, and some are in, and I'm trying to think where the other place is, and they all go together. I'm not going to come up with it right off the top of my head, but they all go together to make up that 18 million. It is a wash.
Okay.
Paul, do you want to go to the next item?
Sure. The next item on the agenda is a discussion of the line item status report. That is, was handed out separately in your board book. It's a 3-page item. Not yet. That will be next. On the line item status report that you have in front of you, it's through September 30th of 2020. The last time you saw this, we were just into July, so you're seeing for the first time here a little bit more activity, about 3 months worth of activity, and personnel services still remain unobligated. This is roughly the same number that you would have seen a year ago at this same time. And then contractual services, keep in mind that contractual services are run through an obligation process, and those numbers will be available to us or be more accurately reflected later on as we go through the year. Some of those dollars that we have available to us in contractual services will end up being used to cover the deficit within the Social Security and group insurance line, the line right above it. A year ago, the comptroller of the state of Illinois asked us to move all of the group life insurance. This is the amount that the governor asked us to pay back in 2002 into the General Revenue Fund. And they asked us to move that. We used to break it out between local and appropriated. They've now asked us to move that all into appropriated. So what we did, or what we are doing, is we've moved all of that into appropriated, and then we're taking those certain expenses, primarily contractual services, a few other things, out of the appropriated funds and moving them over to local funds. We keep the percentages the same of the overall expenses, but we're moving those expenses around so that group insurance is in the appropriated funds according to the wishes of the comptroller. The reason why they wanted that done was because there was a change in the accounting structure, accounting literature, 2 years ago or so, that required the university to pick up our fair share of the university, of the state's other employee benefits, primarily health care. And so we ended up having to show an additional liability on our books, even though the state is responsible for paying it. That was about a $40 million item. It would have really messed up the look of our financial statements. And so in order to avoid that and leave all of that liability on the state's books, we moved this group insurance over to appropriated. A couple of other things, as you can see, the utilities contractual services we're just not far enough into the year to know exactly where we're going to be at. The comment that I will make is that we pay that when we get a bill, so we don't even try to guess what it's going to be. I think for the most part, the rest of the line item status is pretty much in line with where we would expect. The grants and matching funds, a little bit over, but I don't think that's something to truly be excited about at this point. The second semester will have fewer awards and grants in that area, but if anything, that would be an area that I'll be watching for the rest of the year. And finally, the compensated absence reserve, there is nothing spent on that yet. That is for the folks that retire, and we'll see where we end up. We don't have a great rush to retire right now, but certainly COVID has changed some people's minds, and they are looking into that opportunity. Any questions on the line item status report for September 30th?
Hearing none, let's continue with our Finance and Audit Committee items, and the next is a purchase approval, and I believe Sean will be taking us through that. Is that correct, Sean?
That's correct. And this purchase approval is for entering into an intergovernmental agreement with the University of Illinois for their SHIELD testing program that President Glassman spoke to earlier. They've set up their testing so that the unit charge is $20 per test, and the way that their program will work is that we will buy in blocks of tests. Our initial purchase would be for 5,000 tests, so at a charge of $100,000 for the actual test, plus some additional costs for setting up our test area. And what we're asking for is permission to spend up to $310,000, which then would allow us to procure additional blocks of test capacity from SHIELD Illinois as we move forward through not only the end of the fall semester, which is rapidly coming upon us, but also through the entirety of the spring semester. This purchase is exempt from the procurement code, as again, it is an intergovernmental agreement with the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois.
Any questions for Sean?
Hey, Sean, this is Chris. Is it the cost is just the test, so it's not administering, like processing results. It's just cost of just purchasing the test, right?
The $20, what that buys us is the test itself, as well as their laboratory process for analyzing the test and providing that feedback to us. It's an all-inclusive cost for the test, other than the initial setup that would be in addition to the unit cost of $20 per test.
Chris, we would have then additional people on campus that would actually administer the test and send it to the testing lab.
Right.
So it is an all-inclusive price from the standpoint of University of Illinois, but we will have some other internal costs related to this.
Right, and Dr. Flaherty could add to what that will look like, but we will have a number of people who will actually collect the samples and then will deliver the samples to the testing facility in Springfield so that they can be analyzed en masse, and then the SHIELD Illinois will provide those results back to us. Ann, would you like to add some additional detail?
Sure, yep. One of our staff members, Emma Noble in the Health Education Resource Center, is working with all of her grads as well as a few undergrads to be the staff that will run the operation. It's pretty easy to do. Essentially, it's just confirming they've been registered. They can do that in advance. Being on site, directing traffic, but essentially people will walk up, they'll have a vial, they will put their saliva in it and leave it in a bucket and leave. So it's pretty not real labor intensive, but it is being coordinated by a staff member in the HERC.
Okay. Thank you.
And this is no cost to the person taking the test, is that right?
That is correct. There is no fee charged to the student, faculty, or staff member that would go through the testing queue and process.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I believe I have the next item as well, so if we could pull up I have a brief presentation here for an overview of our capital investments for the last year, and I'll take a few minutes to walk you all through that. It's been a challenging year on many fronts, but it's also been a very exciting year. Just at a high level, I wanted to show you this slide, just kind of lists out what we've expended in capital investments and improvements over the last couple of years. I think we're on track to slightly exceed what we expended in FY20 in facilities construction activity. So next slide, please. I've picked out a couple of areas across the campus in which we've had projects to highlight here. Of course, we're super excited about the Gail and Richard Lumpkin School of Nursing. We've had some project complete there for the first phase and have some more exciting work to continue there. McAfee has had several projects completed, or a couple of projects completed, another large project that is getting ready to start. Booth Library and then housing, we have had a monumental amount of activity in renovating and preparing the housing, not only for the return of students, in which we were kind of expanding the footprint of what the students were staying in by offering the single unit rooms and regular housing, but also by renovating other rooms so that we would have capacity for isolation and quarantine. And then lastly, a couple of athletic projects to give you an update on as well. Next slide, please. So to start with the Gail and Richard Lumpkin School of Nursing, Phase 1 is completed, which you can see here, the simulation lab and the equipment and the test models or test patients that they have set up here, which will provide a very engaging environment for teaching nursing. Phase 2 is scheduled to be completed in April and May. That will provide another simulation laboratory. It'll also upgrade flooring throughout the space, provide new air conditioning in some of the rooms, provide a laundry area for washing the linens associated with the nursing laboratories as well. So, next slide. McAfee, the first project there, you can see the computer laboratory in the top picture. We converted a standard classroom into a 30-station computer lab. And I think this is also attached to the School of Nursing project. And in the bottom, they've been creative in McAfee by making use of dead space within some of the common hallway space, if you will, to provide additional seating for breakout space. Now, in our current COVID environment, this has probably been underutilized, but as we move post-COVID, the current planning kind of guidelines and architectural design are showing that these types of spaces are really good for creating sticky alcoves for the students to congregate and to collaborate. And then what's really exciting also at McAfee is the masonry project for the exterior clock tower is in design and will be bidding out, we hope, yet later this winter or later this year, here this calendar year. The clock tower project, more substantial in size, of course, but it's also a state project and the Capital Development Board is managing that. It is in the final parts of design right now, so we hope that they'll be able to get the bid out yet this calendar year, but we'll have to kind of see how their schedule goes yet. Next slide. Booth Library, I think this is also a very exciting project. We have the Center for Student Innovation, and what you see here is the active learning classroom in the upper right corner, and then the lower left corner of the slide, you see what will be the design lab. This laboratory environment also has a couple of breakout rooms. The active learning classroom part will have adaptable and movable technology within it, including flexible, collaborative stacking chairs and the flip-top type tables so that you can rearrange the learning environment to meet your needs. It'll have movable writing surfaces that can also act as partitions. And then the design lab area will have a 3D printer as well as computers. And the goal here, I think, is to have the students to be able to engage in cross-collaboration activities and learning in a flexible lab environment. And it's nearing substantial completion here. As you can see, we haven't moved furniture in yet, but the space is largely done. Next slide. Housing. I spoke to this earlier with some of our efforts this summer and fall in preparing for the return of students. And just to show some examples of the degree of work that's occurred in taking spaces down, in some cases to bare studs, and then building them back up so that they are meet a current standard of comfort, amenity level for the students who would be in them. The residence halls, we've spent a sizable amount of funds there, $225,000. And then if you look at the Greek court, not quite as much money, but I would add that that translates to 43 rooms in Greek court that are now available by replacing a boiler in one of the buildings there. And then university apartments, we have university apartments in 2 locations on campus that we've been working on, both at University Court and then the other university apartments on the southwest side of campus. And we've brought 23 units, renovated and brought back online 23 units in university apartments and 4 2-bedroom apartments in University Court. Next slide. Athletics. A couple of very exciting projects here, both the completion of the Victory Suite, which you see in the bottom left. The space looks great. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to utilize that this fall with football, but it'll be a great space for both the winter football season and certainly for years to come during football games and other events. And then the pictures on the right, we've had a project to upgrade the scoreboards on both the corners of the gym that you see lit up there now, as well as providing the ribbon signage along the baselines of the gym. And we just, within the last week, were able to light those boards up, so it's also a very exciting project. Next slide. Life science building. You get a sizable capital program from the state about once a decade, and this was a very sizable, I'm sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Life science building is a major renovation project with funding from the state. The Capital Development Board will be managing this. We bid this project out in July, and issues with the bid and the budget forced us to go back to the state and ask for additional funds from repair and renovation appropriation pool to cover that difference in the budget, and then we were required, or the state was required to rebid the project, which we did in October. And the revised bids came in slightly lower, but within the modified budget, and we'll be moving forward. We hope to have the contract with the apparent low bidder, which was Grunlow Construction. Hopefully they'll have that in place later this calendar year, and would be able to mobilize and begin working on this renovation of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems and the start of the year. Next slide. Sorry, I was jumping the gun on as I started to introduce the previous slide. This is what is so exciting with campus capital investment here at EIU. With the new science building, of course, is a great project to have coming forward. The design firm was selected this last summer and was approved by the Capital Development Board at their August board meeting. Very sizable project here. And what I've shown here is these cartoons were presented by Ratio Architects during their interview process with both EIU and the Capital Development Board. And all they're showing here on the bottom is a couple of different orientations in which the footprint for this very sizable building could end up taking. The lot that we're looking at is that green space that's bounded by 7th Street on the west and 9th Street on the east, and then the parking lot that abuts to Roosevelt on the south. There's some consideration also of keeping that building on the south side of that and actually consuming some of that excess parking we have in the parking lot to maximize the amount of green space that we would have remaining, and to also take out some of the excess parking that is no longer as necessary as previously was. And there's also, I believe, some tennis courts that are also in that parking lot. So we're really excited about this project moving forward. We did have a kickoff meeting last month with the design team, the Capital Development Board, and Eastern, just to meet all stakeholders. And the Capital Development Board is working to get Ratio fully under contract and hope to have that in place by the end of this calendar year so that design work can start in earnest as we move into January. Next slide. Just to remind or to provide a heads up of other future projects that we would like the state to help us cover. In our annual budget submission to the state, we also include capital project requests. And we have sizable projects that include upgrading utilities infrastructure. This would be largely steam piping and condensate return, as well as repurposing the old steam plant just here to our northeast. And then we have another $33 million in various smaller capital renewal projects that would be similar in size and scale, I think, to what the life science building project is. These projects tend to range from $3-4 million up to maybe $7-8 million. And I believe that's the last slide. I'm happy to take any questions.
Sean, looking at one of the conversations early in our meeting about FY22 budget with the state and either the maintenance or the reduction, does that have any impact on some of your planning?
It would have. So the state appropriation dollars, they're typically bonded for capital projects. And so, for example, I think the funding that they're currently using for for kicking off the design on the new science building, and as well as for the life science building, and Paul, you can correct me if I misspeak here, but are funds that are remaining from previous bond sales, and that the state has not, since announcing the large capital appropriation 2 years ago, they have not come out to sell the bonds to support that yet. Is that accurate, Paul?
Yes.
For some of the other projects that we self-fund, those would come out of our normal budget process, as well as any gift or grants that we might receive for special initiatives.
Joyce, the one additional thing that I'll mention is that typically the state does not act on increasing the appropriation to cover these types of buildings.
Okay.
So to the extent that we would build a new science building, somehow in our budget we're going to have to come up with additional BSWs, additional equipment, although a lot of that equipment is budgeted into that project, but some of those things that will have to be done will have to come out of our budget. I suppose the only good thing is it's not going to happen by 22.
Right, right. The utilities costs, the added deferred maintenance that new buildings will eventually contribute to your expenditures, those will have to cover those types of expenditures.
Thank you.
This is Barb. This isn't a question, but the nursing simulation areas look awesome. Whenever we do get back on campus, sometimes the board tries to get out and about on campus. It might be nice to have a tour of the nursing school simulation areas.
That's a great idea.
We even thought about it for this time until we realized there's not going to be the whole trustees here with us today.
Right.
But we had thought about that. I'd like to just dovetail with the presentation by indicating, as you heard, that some of the funds are coming from direct appropriations for the various projects that we have. Others are coming from self-funding out of our operating dollars. And also some of the projects that you saw are from gift dollars. And this is, obviously, we are extremely grateful to all of our donors that are helping us move forward and making additional improvements on our campus that will be valued by our students as well as our faculty and everybody else. So, for example, what you saw with the Galen Richard School of Nursing, Galen Richard Lumpkin School of Nursing, you know, that is coming from the generosity of the late Dick Lumpkin and his family and the Family Foundation. When we talked about the Schnorf Victory Suite, this is coming from the Schnorf family as well as friends of the Schnorf family. And all of the, everything that you saw related to the scoreboards, new ribbons, new sound system that we have in Lance Arena is a very, very generous gift to the university from First Mid. And this is just, you know, a truly wonderful investment that these companies and individuals are placing to EIU. And we couldn't be more grateful for their generosity and wish to thank them publicly, all of them. Because this is really, truly a partnership that we have with our advocates, our supporters, and the industries and businesses that we work with and that support the university is a very, very important part of our success. So shout out to all of them with our thanks.
Hey, Sean and Paul, other than the capital improvement with the new HVAC for the life sciences building, have we, in the era of COVID, have we been considering, or like we have to retrofit or put in new filters and to all the HVAC systems, something of that nature?
It's a great question. Yeah, good question. What we have done is ASHRI, which is, I think, the Association of Engineers associated with ventilation systems, they've came out a recommendation that the CDC points to on what the ventilation standards should be. And one of those recommendations was to upgrade building filtration systems to a filter that has what's called a MERV rating of 13. And we have gone through that process to procure those filters with that rating, and have been there had been some delays this fall on shipping of some materials, and these filters, this filter type was there were some delays for some of our buildings in receiving those, but we are going through the process of upgrading all of our building filters, ventilation system filters, to that MERV 13 filter standard. We've also, to further enhance the air quality within our buildings, we purchased HEPA filters that are portable and have been put into the classroom environments for all of the in-person teaching that has been occurring this fall, and those then provide additional localized air filtration within the actual classroom environments. And as Paul mentioned earlier, we're running the building systems for more hours a day to increase the building turnover of the air system as well, which is another recommendation from ASHRI.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Great, thank you.
Our last topic in the Finance and Audit Committee is the Internal Audit Annual Report. I believe that the trustees have all received the annual report. We do have our internal auditor with us to address any questions that you might have relative to it. So let me ask Lee, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to introduce before questions?
I just want to say that this is our normal report we have to put out every year, required by the state. There's nothing in particular that I want to point out here. We had one high finding during the year, but it was cleared immediately. So I'll just entertain questions if anybody has anything about what happened in internal audit in the last year.
This is Barb. There were several areas you were not able to get to. Do you consider any of those to be have much risk or a lot of risk associated with them, or were they lower risk areas?
The medical clinic is the one we really wanted to get to and didn't, and so we've moved that forward to this audit year. So that's the one we deemed to be the highest risk. The other two that we couldn't get to, we've dropped and moved on to what we consider other high risk things after we did the new risk assessment each year.
And again, there were several that were still outstanding. They didn't seem moderate to low risk for the most part. Any concerns there?
No, and I've cleared about 3 of those so far this year. Some of those are just have to do with timing, like the course fees audit was done at the end of the year, and we were doing the stay-at-home order, so that made it a little bit more difficult, just timing-wise for follow-up. But I've been following up as their deadlines come across.
By the way, congratulations on your education accomplishment. That's outstanding.
Thanks.
Other questions from the trustees?
I didn't have any questions, but just wanted to reiterate a good report. We're an office of one person. Looks like you're pretty busy.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anything else then for finance? If not, let's take a 10-minute break. Try to be back at 10 after 10. That sound okay, President?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. see.
I think we are all back except for Mr. McCann, but I believe we can move forward.
Yeah, let's go ahead since we need to get going. So let's start then with academic and student affairs.
Well, good morning. We're going to begin with an overview of the National Survey of Student Engagement, or what we often refer to as NSSE here on campus. NSSE is administered every 3 years. It's administered to first year and senior students. And the goal of NSSE is to understand and get a comparison about the high-impact practices here at Eastern Illinois compared to our peers across the state of Illinois, Carnegie peers, as well as all universities across the nation that participate in that survey. And it's literally thousands of universities participate in this survey annually. And when we look at NSSE, it really focuses on something we call high-impact practices. And high-impact practices are something that we know engages students, promotes persistence, and results in a line of sight to graduation, because rich, meaningful relationships develop between learners, their peers, and faculty. And one of the projects we saw today that Sean presented, the Center for Student Innovation, was one of those examples. It's an innovative space that's designed to bring students and learners together with faculty to be creative. And like some of the other projects, is also funded through the generosity of donors. In the case of the CSI, the Charleston Area Community Foundation. So in terms of NSSE 2020, next slide, please. It does survey both first year and seniors students. We had about 326 first year respondents. That's about 26% of every first year student participated in the survey. And we had a slightly higher percentage rate, although the number was smaller for seniors at 30% participation. Next slide. NSSE really sort of measures a series of factors, or what we refer to as domains. And each of these domains exist at sort of the macro level as well as the micro level. So what you're going to see over the next few slides is the data both at the broad scale, which you see at this slide, as well as a more refined scale. In terms of the 4 domains that NSSE assesses, they are academic challenge, learning with peers, experience with faculty, and the campus environment. And this table, what it demonstrates is that, generally speaking, in most cases, we are equivalent to or higher than our peers, as well as Carnegie peers in the state, Carnegie or peers around the state, as well as all institutions. By and large, our first-year students perform especially well as it relates to learning strategies and academic challenge relative to Illinois peers. And we have strengths in student-faculty interaction, as well as discussions with diverse others. And we see that theme again and again throughout the data. There is one area where we have performed slightly less well than our Illinois peers, and that is collaborative learning. So the first year data really is the benchmark, and what we tried to understand is what's that growth pattern over the course of a learner's experience at Eastern Illinois University. Next slide. When we look at the senior data, what we can see is in the course of 4 years, our students really grow. We see improvements across all areas. We see some areas where we still have some challenges. Collaborative learning, once again, is where we're performing slightly lower than our Illinois peers and Carnegie peers, but relative to all universities participating, we're still in that standard deviation, so we're in good shape. But what's really positive here is higher order learning, reflective integrative learning, student-faculty interactions, the things that sort of resonate with our brand, our identity, that our points of pride are clearly points of strength in the data. Next slide. And when you look at the performance by individual items, it's sort of the micro level, we can see that our first-year students have large numbers of community-based projects compared to our peers. They work closely with faculty outside of classrooms, where we have some places to sort of improve. It would be in areas of amount of time spent on assigned reading and total time spent preparing for a class. So first year data, there's points of pride, and there's also places where we can identify areas for improvement as they relate to the student experience. Next slide. In the senior data, what we see is similar points of pride and strength relative to relationships with faculty members and so on, as it relates to work with the faculty member on activities other than coursework. But we do see some changes in the relationship and interactions between students and faculty relative to peer institutions, as well as, once again, we see the 15 hours of preparation for class and 10 hours on assigned reading. So those are two areas of opportunity for growth, and we'll be working with faculty in the general education program as we build out a new assessment program to understand what that means and how we might address those issues. Next slide, please. In terms of high impact practices, which things like the Center for Student Innovation, they include study abroad, they include undergraduate research, creativity, such as performances in the music program or art exhibits in studio art. What we see is our first-year students really hit it out of the park relative to, first-year experiences and outperform all institutions, Carnegie peers, and Illinois publics. And that's really, really impressive when we look at nearly every student has participated in one HIP as part of a class. This is critical because this is in addition to our Operation Jumpstart activities and so on. So we see first-year students really engaging in high-impact practices, and we also see by the time seniors have been here 4 years, they participated in 2 or more high-impact practices, the vast majority of them, and over nearly 90% of our seniors have had at least one high-impact practice over the course of their 4 years at Eastern Illinois University. Next slide. Next slide. And when we look at high-impact practices compared to peers, our areas of strength appear to be service learning, as well as participating in more than one activity. So most of our learners have more than one high-impact practice experience in their first year. Once we get to the senior year, we see the capstone, or what we call the culminating senior experience. Our students perform better than their peers, and so they're engaged in more capstone-related activities, such as internships, such as a capstone project, such as undergraduate research. And if you're a language major, that would include study abroad for a semester. So we see our students also participating at the senior level in 2 or more sort of high-impact practices. So the data are strong. There are some areas where we can improve. We need to do better with identifying internship opportunities, or maybe communicating them in such a way that students are aware of them. How do we get students placed in those internships and get them planning around internships earlier in their career? How do we infuse internships into the liberal arts curriculum above and beyond the professional programs? That's something that over the next few years, I'm confident the Division of Academic Affairs will begin to have a dialogue around. And then finally, the final slide, each year, each cycle, we're allowed to pick a topical area of expertise. One of the things that I initiated, I guess 2.5 years ago, was an assessment advising, because academic advising is so critical to the success of our learners. So for the past 2 years, we've been doing a survey of first-year students to get a sense of their initial advising experience, both in new student orientation, but also in the fall semester as they prepare to launch for their second semester of enrollment. And the advising experience is overwhelmingly positive. Students enjoy working with professional advisors, and we looked at senior data. Students especially like working with faculty advisors. The NESI data sort of confirm what our own internal data over the past 2 years has said. Overwhelmingly a positive across the board. Students recognize that it's a developmental process. They understand they're using technology appropriately, whether that's a DARS report or communicating with faculty members electronically. Our first year experience as it relates to advising actually outperforms our Carnegie peers in almost every measure on the survey. And at the senior year, we sort of even out a bit. The senior experience is more akin to what we see with our Carnegie peers. It's either equal to or right at. There was one area, however, where there was a bit of a concern, and that's around the notion of success or academic coaches, which we actually do not have at Eastern Illinois University. We do not have a coaching model. So I think at the freshman level, the first year level, when we look at the new faculty or the new student orientation. I think students probably equate that more with a coaching experience than maybe their senior counterparts do. So by and large, a very good data. We do well year over year with NESE. Our next survey will be in about 2.5 years. And then we'll look at the longitudinal data and see where we are. These are opportunities for us to sort of celebrate the work of our students, celebrate the work of our faculty, and identify areas for improvement. So with that, I open to questions.
Just a little more color on collaborative learning, what that means.
Collaborative learning refers to not just only group projects, but projects where you might collaborate within and between sort of standing levels. You know, first-year students collaborating with seniors, for example, in a major-based course, or faculty intentionally creating groups within and between classes. Learning communities would be one example of that. It really depends on the campus and its unique curriculum. But from the NESE's perspective, it really is team-based learning and how you might partner with not only your peers, but also faculty, and whether those partnerships are within the major or within the general education program. When I think about the first year experience, obviously that's going to be primarily based upon the general education experience, more so than the major. So we're going to see more collaborative learning in the senior year. So when I think about case studies in the business program, those are clearly collaborative. So our seniors perform better in that area. So how do we then sort of begin to drill down and get those experiences earlier in the curriculum?
So it's really not interdisciplinary, it's more within the class?
Within the class, unless there's a learning community framework, and we just don't have that framework here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Jay? Nice thing about the NESE is that it is so widely used throughout the country. It gives a great perspective when we compare ourselves to all universities. When they talk about Carnegie, these are Carnegie classes of university. I'm not sure that all the trustees are aware of the Carnegie classification, but you might have heard of Research 1 universities, like our flagship University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. That's a Carnegie classification. Our Carnegie classification is a university that provides up to master's degrees. And so when we do our comparison of our Carnegie group, it would be other like schools across the nation that have that same level of education and mission. And of course, the Illinois publics are easily well defined. Hearing no additional questions for Jay, I think we can go down to our next report, and that will be a discussion and report about student mental health, particularly as it relates to the pandemic. The pandemic has been challenging for students on multiple levels, and not just different modalities that they're utilizing for their classes and technology issues that might affect some of them. There are certainly some mental health correlative issues that have taken place by the pandemic. And so Dr. Flaherty will take you through this presentation.
Thank you, President Glassman. I'm aware that former VPSA Lynette Drake did a pretty comprehensive presentation last January on mental health both at EIU and nationally. So my goal today really is just to kind of do a snapshot of some of the themes that we've been seeing this fall as we've worked to support students in the middle of a pandemic. I suspect a lot of what I'm going to share won't surprise you, but do think it's important to point out. Because we're not quite all the way through the semester, I don't have a lot of specific hard data to compare to previous semesters in terms of how many visits, how many crisis visits, et cetera. I can do that in the future, but want to share with you some themes. I can tell you, though, that demand for counseling is very high. At one point, we had close to 90 people on the wait list. Fortunately, we have got that down to a very small number, And all those individuals have been offered either personal counseling or are part of group sessions. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of national data, sharing with you some data from both the CDC and Active Minds. Active Minds is a nonprofit group that supports mental health awareness and education in young adults. And they did a survey just this past September with over 2,000 college students. About 75% of respondents reported that their mental health has worsened, somewhat worsened, or worsened significantly since the pandemic began. High percentages of respondents have experienced stress or anxiety, disappointment or sadness, and felt lonely or isolated. And the CDC reports that 1 in 4 young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 have seriously contemplated suicide during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Just a few general pandemic stressors, I think not even just for students, but for all of us. Fear that I myself or someone that I love will contract COVID-19, fearing that I will be responsible for spreading it to others, having trouble focusing with studies and work, feeling disconnected from friends and loved ones. Next slide, please. Certainly, there's a lot of uncertainty regarding the unknown, uncertainty related to academics, inability to participate in activities that are important to me, as well as fear and worry about their financial situation, loss of a job, or services that they rely on, or for students, maybe loss of job for parents or the family that support them. Next slide, please. This slide is themes that I've received from my folks that work in the counseling clinic, our student support team, Res Life, and others in student affairs. These are some top reporting themes that they hear from students when they talk to them. Burnout in particular, burnout I think impacts all students, but this year it has hit at a much earlier rate by about even week 6. Feelings of isolation and loneliness. As you know, our students are in single rooms this year if you're living on campus. All the fatigues, COVID fatigue, Zoom fatigue, just general 2020 fatigue. Disappointment is a big one, just loss of experiences, whether it be, that wasn't able to go through commencement, participating in sporting events, homecoming. I personally felt a disappointment as I've heard so much about our homecoming here at EIU. Just a couple other things I would talk about would be, the last thing I would talk about would be a constant emergency state. This is the idea that at any given time, I might get put into quarantine or isolation, and I need to be ready to up and leave at any moment. And so kind of always being on heightened awareness that things could change in a moment. Next slide, please. This list is top concerns and conditions at EIU specific to the counseling clinic. So in any given year, they create a list of top presenting symptoms. And this list looks fairly similar to previous years with one notable exception that I'll talk about in a minute. Anxiety has overtaken depression for most counseling centers and college settings somewhere in the last 4 or 5 years. But I know that anxiety has been even exacerbated in the pandemic. With depression being number 2. And then academic concerns has come up as the 3rd most presenting condition in the counseling center for our students. This wasn't even in the top 8 last fall, so not articulated in that specific way. And I think this is because students are just struggling with academics in general because of the different modalities, transitioning maybe from hybrid to online or completely virtual. The way they submit class for one class, maybe through D2L may look different for another class, and schedules may change from week to week. So I think that this pandemic has really obviously impacted students in terms of academics. Next slide, please. Just want to share this slide just as a reminder of all the services that we do have available for students in terms of clinical interventions, services, and programs to address mental health. In our counseling center, of course, we offer individual counseling, group counseling. We've really tried to increase our group counseling offerings so that we can accommodate more students. We currently have 3 group therapy sessions, 2 anxiety group sessions, and 1 general self-compassion group. Of course, we do case management, anger management. We do a lot of consultation and outreach to other faculty and staff. We provide psychiatric care with a psychiatrist consult, as well as we have a psychiatric nurse practitioner on staff. And can do medication monitoring, et cetera. We also have a great resource in our student support team that is part of the Office of Student Accountability and Support. Next slide, please. So thinking about the spring semester, what can we continue to do to support our students, knowing that we're most likely going to be in this same environment for a while? Fortunately, we will be able to increase our number of counseling appointments. We are in the process of, we're interviewing and bringing on board a new counselor. That was thanks to the fee increase that happened last year that allowed us to add to our counseling center staff. Again, I mentioned group sessions. We really need to maximize those offerings. I think we're going to look to ways that we can continue to partner with academic affairs. This past Monday was our first gen day of celebration. We have created a student affairs first gen website. So those are individuals that identify as first gen, can be mentors and resources for our first gen students. Maintain as many possible co-curricular opportunities as we can. We know that students are looking for ways to stay connected, be in a community. So, as many of those as possible, whether it be programming from the university board, RSOs, service learning opportunities, et cetera. Also being more intentional to outreach to our RSOs. I've tried to meet with different student groups and will continue to do that to check in to see how students are doing, how we can support them. And then the last item is physical activity. Also in that Healthy Mind study, they reported that COVID-19 hasn't just only affected students' mental health, but nearly 56% of respondents said that their daily level of physical activity has significantly decreased or significantly decreased. And certainly we know that exercising releases all the good endorphins that help with mental health. We know here at EIU that rec center usage has been down while our capacity has been reduced because of COVID guidelines. They haven't maxed out capacity. So trying to find out why students are not using that facility is something we'll be looking at. Certainly, whenever the weather is good too, we encourage students to get out and take advantage of the different resources around the Charleston area. Next slide, please. So kind of thinking ahead, while I'm still in my first 100 days, I'm still evaluating the needs of not only the division, but mental health services on campus. I have some initial ideas. First, I want to acknowledge that Lindsay Wilson, who has been the interim assistant director in the counseling clinic for close to, I believe, the last 5 years, she has actually asked to step back into a full-time role as a provider, as a counselor. So we will be looking at leadership for the counseling clinic moving forward. I think what I would like to do, I'm hoping that we can develop some sort of peer counselor program to give opportunities for students to engage with other students. This happens to some degree already with our resident assistants. I know that some faculty have gone through mental health first aid. So can we expand that so that our faculty and staff can be partners for our counseling center staff? Again, I mentioned our student support team. They're a great resource. They address behavioral and mental health concerns of students at a lower level before maybe they escalate to the counseling center. Teletherapy has been really interesting. Before the pandemic, I believe most therapists were not interested in or did not see the role that teletherapy can play in counseling, but I think we have learned through the pandemic that it can work, and for some students, meeting virtually actually works better. Next slide. I think we need to continue to look at online resources. There's a lot of great apps out there that can help students in terms of meditation and support. There's some great ones out there that are very low cost for college students, such as Calm. Insight Timer is free. I think we need to look at ways to get those resources to our students. We definitely have to look at alternative counseling modalities. Traditionally, a counseling session has always been around 50 minutes. That may not always be what our students need, and if we shorten some of those, it creates potentially some additional counseling center spots. Again, group therapy, continue to expand those options. And then last, one of my overarching goals is to help enhance and create a culture at EIU that actively supports and promotes holistic well-being and resiliency. And that would be a collaborative effort across the whole campus, but specifically with partnerships with our Health Education Resource Center, the Recreation Center, and Academic Affairs. So clearly the pandemic has impacted the experiences our students have had this fall, and certainly the mental health of many of our students. But I'm really proud of the work that our Student Affairs team and faculty have done to support our students. And I know, when I walk around campus and do talk to students, I do hear from them, mostly from everyone. They're very happy to be here and thank the Student Affairs and folks that for all that they're doing. So that's just kind of a quick overview of kind of what we've seen this fall with the pandemic as it relates to mental health. happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ann. Are there questions for Ann?
I don't have any questions. I just have a statement. The past 2 years, student government has put a massive emphasis on mental health awareness and mental health of students. And I just wanted to say I'm really glad to hear that all these resources and all these upgrades are being implemented for students. So thank you, Dr. Flaherty, for all that.
Thank you, Michael.
Other questions from the trustees? Very good. And obviously a very, very important topic and one that we are not only watching closely, but we are doing the best to be proactive as we go forward. I think we all realize that the mental health of the students is directly correlated with their ability and success in the classroom. And so the more well-balanced in nutrition, in exercise, in mental health, all of that taken together is going to help students be successful. So that we have to be mindful of that, and we have to help our students develop those abilities and those good footings so that they are more likely to succeed. So a very, very important topic for us and something that Dr. Flaherty has been involved in for many years prior to her experience at EIU, which she reminds us of that she's still in her first 100 days. That probably seems like her first 1,000 days after joining us during this unusual time. But her specialization really is in the mental health and health world of students, as well as other experiences and expertises. And I know she's very, very passionate about this particular area. We talk about it often during our one-on-ones, and I really look forward to her contributions in that area in supporting the mental health of our students. The last topic that we have in the Academic Affairs and Student Affairs Committee dovetails with that discussion that we had earlier about equity and utilizing resources in order to assist our students, particularly students who are of low income, minority, first generation, or rural students, to be advantaged, to have access to a university like EIU, and to have the resources in place in order to help them continue through their journey to be retained and move forward to graduation. There was the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund that came out of the original CARES Act stimulus funds, and EIU was a recipient of about $1 million of that funding. And Josh is going to discuss with you exactly how we are taking that $1 million and implementing it into a number of initiatives that will be helpful to EIU recruit and retain students of low income, minority students, rural students, and first generation students. So Josh, are you there?
I'm here and ready.
Okay, take us through. This is really exciting, and it'll show you to the trustees what we can do when we have resources available to us to support these equity types of initiatives that will have an impact on achievement gaps and equity gaps for our students. So Josh, take it away.
Thanks so much, President Glassman. So we just have a little bit of a presentation here for the trustees just on the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. me just a second to get my screen oriented here. It included, from a federal standpoint, national standpoint, $3 billion in direct flexible education funding for governors to provide to school districts, higher education, early childhood education, and other education entities. And our total allotment was $1.1 million. And each governor provided a purpose for the state entities, and the governor's office communicated to us that we were to use these funds for the purpose of recruitment and retention of minority, low-income, and first-generation students by mitigating the barriers due to the COVID-19 crisis, including the digital gap. And so the president empowered me to pull together a committee of folks that were selected and nominated by the vice presidents across the university. So we had leaders across the universities who worked on this initiative in a record time, in less than 2 months, to pull together a 39-page document of 26 total proposals, of which 25 were approved, to include summary, budget, timeline, population impacted, goals and desired outcome, and metrics for determining effectiveness. And so we put together this document. We said, how can we spend this $1.1 million in a way that will close the equity gap, will result in more of the impacted population showing up when it comes time to matriculate for the university? Most importantly, how do we keep our students on our campus and ensure their success and retention from semester to semester? So we came up with some really, really, really great proposals. And like I said, 25 of 26 were approved by the governor's office. And so just to show you an example proposal, what it looked like, how we filled 39 pages with these ideas, with these initiatives that we thought and believe can change the face of the university when it comes to supporting minority, low-income, and first-generation students. You know, every initiative had a summary. Every initiative had a detailed budget. You can see one here specifically for our minority, low-income, and first-generation access marketing and recruitment initiative. This is really about bringing more students in, identifying those students, and heavily relies on direct mail, because we know that that's a modality of communication that is effective in this time frame. The students are just getting bombarded by technology and emails and text messages. Good old direct mail is an effective way to reach these populations. And so you can see where we've got these expenditures for just one of these proposals, and then also a timeline, really working through that college choice process and the enrollment cycle to make sure that we're supporting those students with direct mail. And there are also electronic communications to go along with that to attract more of this impacted population to our university. We identified the population that impacted: minority, low-income, first-generation students currently engaged in the college search process. We had goals and desired outcomes for every proposal. Like, we knew, we want to know exactly what we're trying to accomplish with this $1.1 million as we work to impact both our prospective and current students. We want to increase enrollment rates and ultimately the population EIU serves of minority, low-income, and first-generation students. We wanted to measure effectiveness, like after this is all done, and I hope we can get all 25 of these initiatives done before September. I think that's the hardest thing about this is, you know, we had a strategic enrollment plan of 43 some strategic action plans to get to our enrollment goal, and then inject $1.1 million, which I'm really excited about, but add that 43 to that 25, and I'm like, I didn't plan for this. And so we're just really being agile and nimble when it comes to changing our strategy and having an incredible focus on student retention and student success this year. So measuring effectiveness for this particular proposal was, we wanted to make sure that effectiveness of the program will be measured by the increase in enrollment of the desired population. So pretty simple there for that metric. And so just a summary of the initiatives. I'm not going to go into detail on every initiative because I literally could talk for 3 hours. I mean, so many amazing things planned for our campus, and specifically for the population identified by the governor's office. You know, that first initiative that we talked about before was paying at-risk remaining summer and spring balances for low-income, underrepresented, and first-generation students likely to retain without financial factors. I mean, that was just an amazing endeavor. It was like, surprise, we paid off your bill. And those communications we got from those students, it really felt like we were Oprah. You get one, and you get one, and you get one. And they were so grateful. to have that, what was definitely a burden, relieved for them and for them to be able to persist on to the following semester. That was an amazing initiative that we did in short time, got pre-approval from the governor's office, and really helped during the pandemic to make sure that we retain the maximum amount of students from that fall and from that spring and summer term to the fall 2020 term. The Panther portal, I would say out of the 25 projects, I am most excited about this project just because it has the potential to benefit us for decades. We met with Tyler Phelps and Mona Davenport, and then also athletics. Cindy Allman from athletics yesterday, we're just talking about the possibilities for this Panther portal. We're even talking about changing the name to the Panther Advising and Student Success System. And so it's going to be this comprehensive system where we track all of our communications around student success and retention. We include our early alert system, our advising form. You guys, some of the trustees are familiar with My EIU. This is going to be the My EIU for student success. You know that My EIU has been an incredible tool for us for the last 3 years. I am really, really excited about this project and the impact it's going to have on student success and retention and serving our students in the future. We want to do minority, low income, and first generation access marketing and recruitment. We talked about that proposal. That was the example. FAFSA and application workshop development and promotion. We're going to be working with community-based organizations and high school counselors. We're like, how can we help you? You guys are just pulling your hair out trying to support these students. And so this initiative is really trying to help those counselors and community-based organizations support those student populations that need that support most in this time. Addressing the technology gap and necessary support for underrepresented students. We're buying computers for those students who don't have them. It's all central to the library. Zach Newell has been incredibly instrumental in that initiative. And so we'll all go out to the library. We're going to make sure that every student possible's technology gap is met so that they can successfully participate in online activities and classes. Innovative open grant program. There's a lot of focus on research and creativity. And so that's going to happen through the library. We're going to overcome communication barriers for underrepresented students with NOMIA. We're trying to look at different technologies. How can we meet these students where they're at? If you ever use the application Marco Polo, this is like the Marco Polo for higher education. And so it allows the student to prioritize that communicate via video, which is very personal. I think NOMIA is going to be awesome for our students, and especially for those underrepresented students. Provide 24-hour support for underrepresented students with AI and chatbot. So we're going to have an artificial chatbot powered by artificial intelligence for both our prospective students and our current students, so that Billy the Panther can answer their questions night and day. So a student can ask us a question about the FAFSA or verification at 2 a.m. and get an immediate response. And because of the artificial intelligence, they're going to be able to get an accurate answer. Just so crazy as we're working with potential vendors just to see how students form a relationship with this bot, and they're talking about, I love Billy, if Billy was their bot. I love Billy the Panther. He always has the right answers for me. He helped me with this. It's incredible that technology has come to a point where we can take some of the load off of our staff by utilizing artificial intelligence and this particular SMS chatbot that we're hoping to acquire through this process. There are much more, and I don't have a ton of time, but I'm just going to read through these, because if I elaborate on every one, we're going to be here again for hours. We're going to market, recruit, and create additional access to increase the completion of advanced degrees for minority, low income, and first generation students. We want to see more underrepresented students get their graduate degrees. Provide incentivized mentor training to create effective mentors to support our underrepresented students, including Freshman Connection, LEAP, all of the mentor programs we have. We want to make those mentors more effective and employ more of them on our campus. Honors College, underrepresented recruitment marketing. We want to see more underrepresented students in our Honors College. Create access for underrepresented students to EIU's campus. We want to provide bus trips. And again, this is tough with COVID, but more access for those underrepresented students. Those underrepresented students, time and time again, are the population of students who show up to campus, never have seeing the campus in person. So that always blows my mind that we have this population of students that show up here in the fall and have never physically been here. We want to close digital communication gaps and bolster recruitment efforts with social media streaming equipment. We're buying some new streaming equipment. We just continue to see, it was over 80% this year of students who said that the social media informed their college choice process. And so we really want to meet the students where we're at. And so we're going to be doing some streaming. We've already started, and that equipment is on order. It's really going to allow us to effectively meet that population of students who are 17, 18 years old, as well as our new incoming transfers. Free printing to support our underrepresented students, something so simple but beneficial for our students. Expand publicly accessible wireless access. So O'Brien Field will have an entire wireless field. So students who, if we go remote or they need wireless access or they don't have good wireless access where they're at, they can drive to the parking lot of O'Brien Field, get that wireless access. Site-wide Zoom license, just so that we can continue to facilitate some of those virtual interactions. Provide assistance to retain minority, first generation, and low-income students fall to spring. We're going to be providing financial literacy training along with additional assistance for our current students as we work down the list of students who currently have student account holds. Minority alumni recruitment training. We have gone, at this point, we have over 700 alumni advocates, and we're looking at that pool and looking to equip those alumni advocates who are underrepresented so that they can reach out to that student population. Promote undergraduate research and creative activity among underrepresented groups, funding for underrepresented student organization initiatives, implement a centralized tutoring center, student identified initiatives, travel and leadership development budget for our students, academic support for first generation low income and ethnic minorities, and that includes supplemental instruction and some additional furnishings for our multicultural center, just to make it a more accessible and used space for our prospective students and current students. And so I really just want to thank all the folks who helped develop that 39-page document. It just was an incredible feat in the short amount of time, because the reason why we were under the gun is, unlike a standard strategic enrollment plan or an action plan within that strategic enrollment plan, there isn't an expiration date. We can always push it to the following year. But with these funds, they essentially expire September 2021. We're just trying to get the proposals together, get them approved as quickly as possible so that we could start this work that is going to make a difference for our university for this year and for years to come.
Josh, I think all this is amazing how much got done in such a short period of time. When you have people's focus in the dollars, right, it is a high motivator, but it looks like there's quite a few initiatives that will really have an impact. Thank you.
Yeah, Josh, I just want to second what Barbara said. And I would like to drill down a little bit more on these topics, not today, but would it be possible to get access to the 39-page document, just to kind of see where you guys have done with that? And just knowing how important this is to the governor and just it is for our university and the state, I think a lot of work surrounding this would be great and much needed. So thank you. And thank you and your president's team for doing this.
Other questions for Josh? Very good. Thank you, Josh, and thank you to the entire team that's been involved in putting these proposals together, getting them approved by the governor's office, and making this a reality for our students. This is a great jumpstart to more equity-based activities and other opportunities that we see for the future. At this point, that would conclude the Academic Affairs and Student Affairs Committee presentations and discussions for today. which would move us to our last committee meeting of the morning, and that would be University Advancement and Alumni Affairs Committee. I'll turn it over to Dr. Wettstein.
Thank you, President Glassman, and good morning, everyone. I'm excited to share some report information as a part of this committee meeting for University Advancement and Alumni Affairs Committee. And we do have one action item which will come up in the slides, an action item that's slated for the board later today. But I thought I'd start by sharing some metrics on how fundraising has gone through the first quarter of the fiscal year. So if you could advance to the next slide. This first slide talks about the donors that have made gifts so far through the end of September. And on the first chart there that you can see that our number of donors compared to this point in prior fiscal years is kind of falling in the range that's been typical. So we're at 1,484 donors through September 30th. That's down from where we were at this point last year, but it's ahead of 2 years ago and fairly close to fiscal 18. And I've reported this data to you in 3 different batches or groups because it's really important to understand the dynamics of this as we think about our donors. Any donor to EIU in any given year is either a new donor, which means they've never made a gift to EIU, or they're a recovered donor. In the industry, we would call them a SIBUNT, some years, but not yet this year. And the other group is the LIBUNTs, which are last year, but not yet this year. And so a LIBUNT is a retained donor if you manage to get a gift from them. And so you can see how important with the gray bars on that chart. The gray bars represent our retained donors, and they're always going to be an important element in our fundraising program. In the same way that in admissions, it's easier to retain a student than it is to recruit a new student. The same is true in philanthropy. It's easier to retain a donor than it is to acquire a new donor or to recover a SIBUNT donor. And so we'll continue to track, and you can expect that at a quarterly basis I'll be sharing these numbers. The chart on the right is that same batch of 1,484 donors or other numbers for various years, but it shows you where in the range of giving those donors fall. And so that far right column or that far right tower is where we're at here in this fiscal year 21, and you can see we've had 1,405 donors in that $999 or less, basically donors below $1,000. And they form the backbone of our philanthropy program. They don't form the vast majority of the dollars that come in, but they're a really important aspect of our pyramid to make sure that we're continuing to have donors in that range. So again, a similar story to what we've seen with the total number of donors. We're down from last year, which was a near record year, but ahead of 2 years ago. And then you can see the gift range breakdowns above that go from $1,000 to $5,000, $5,000 to $25,000, and then the very topmost color group is the gifts of $25,000 and above. So that's kind of a snapshot of what's been happening with donors so far in quarter 1. I am a little concerned that we're behind last year, but I also feel really good about some solicitations that we have scheduled come up here in quarter 2 in our direct mail program. This slide talks about the revenue, the gifts that, the dollar amounts that have come in. And again, it tells a story of trailing last year, but ahead of 2 years ago. And again, this is that, those same bifurcations of the data based on the gift range. But it just shows the amount of dollars that have come in, so that you can see of the $978,000 in gift income that we've had so far this year, about $600,000 of that has come from the highest gift category. So when we talk about the giving pyramids in philanthropy, donors, the pyramid, most of the donors lie in the bottom row of the pyramid, but most of the dollars come in the top tiers of the pyramid. And that would be true for us as well. All the other 3 areas combined don't even come up to the amount that the 600,000 represents from the top areas. The first set of slides when I was talking about donors causes me to want to compel you all to understand why it's important to have a comprehensive program that's getting donors at all giving ranges. This chart explains to you why it's so very important to have gift officers who are working in the major gift categories, because it's those larger gifts and those larger donors that are going to generate the larger piles of dollars and then create the opportunities that you've heard others talk about, whether it's some of the capital gifts that have come through, obviously the transformational and catalytic gift with the School of Nursing. So we need both. We need to be working really hard to acquire new donors and to bring new donors into our funnel at the low levels, but we also have to continually invest in and support a major gift program, which is obviously more challenging in the era of COVID. I want to begin sharing with the board at more frequency the impact of the dollars raised. And so that 900,000 or so that has come in gifts already this year, I wanted to describe for you how it falls in three broad categories. Sometimes a gift comes in and it goes into the endowment. Sometimes a gift goes in and it comes sideways to the university and assists with operating in that year. And then sometimes a gift comes in and it's a gift that's intended for capital. The capital expense may happen in that year, or it's a pile of cash that's building up to do something in terms of capital. So for us through quarter one, we've had about 500,000 in endowment gifts and about 450,000 in operating gifts, and only a modest amount of capital giving so far in this first quarter. The capital number will grow. It may not grow as a percentage too much bigger than of the overall giving because we have some just calendar aligned gifts that will flow throughout the fiscal year. And that impact has a real effect on the campus. On the student aid side, in the fiscal year we just closed, we had more than $1.8 million in scholarships that were awarded to about 800 students in the last fiscal year. And people have spoken about some of the capital projects that were funded partially or completely through donor dollars, including the Victory Suite, the scoreboard project. We had a renovation of a tutoring space in the physics area and the observatory. These are just some of many projects that have already been completed and were significantly or fully funded by donor gifts. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the engagement that's happening. We're seeing some really good movement on memberships in our Alumni Association. And you can kind of see the growth trend from 3 years ago. In October of 2017, we were at about 2,000 members. We're now well north of 2,300 members. And when I asked the alumni staff about this in particular, they said, oddly enough, it's because we are not able to do direct events and programming in the same way that we usually do. Our staff have been able to devote more time to some of the nuts and bolts, roll up your sleeves kind of things it takes to cultivate and attract more people to pay a membership fee to be a part of the Alumni Association. I'd also give a lot of credit to the board of the Alumni Association, which has made membership one of their priorities in terms of cultivating more membership. And then that bottom stat, the alumni giving rate, is a really important phenomenon for me to understand. And what you're seeing there is the alumni giving rate for the last 3 years has gone down every year. And those are the full fiscal year numbers for those first three columns. That would have been where we finished each of those fiscal years. So we dipped under 3% for our alumni giving rate. And so far, we're at 1.8% through just this first quarter. So we need to continue to work towards that. This is one of the challenging phenomenon for me as the VP to try to understand, because we have an extremely satisfied alumni cohort. We have some of the happiest alumni, not just in the region, but in the country in terms of our alumni satisfaction rate. But we also have a low giving rate. So I guess the bad news is, why is that happening? That seems dissonant. The good news is, I feel like there should be great potential for more of our alumni to give if we can connect that goodwill they have and that strong feeling they have about Eastern and turn that into philanthropy. So I continue to be optimistic about that phenomenon, but I'm not proud of where our alumni giving rate is.
Ken,
Now,
is Q1 seasonally low or high, and can you?
I wish I knew the answer, Joe. We have, as I was asking my alumni staff to pull this together, they couldn't find an easy way to calculate the alumni giving rate quarterly. We now, so I don't know whether 1.08 is good compared to last year or not. My sense is it's probably similar to last year, but just because of what we were seeing in the other data, but I don't know. What I do know is we'll be tracking this as a quarterly stat going forward. So we will get a snapshot. In fact, what I won't be sharing with you, but I'm looking at it monthly. I just want to kind of see as we close out each month, how are we looking and how are we proceeding. And then another way to measure engagement is what are the giving rates of some of our important constituencies. So I shared the alumni giving rate. The board giving rate last year was at about 92%. If you look at across the three boards that are active with EIU, the BOT, the Alumni Association Board, and the Foundation Board. And obviously we have a goal this year and every year to try to be at 100% for giving. And if that wasn't the softest ask I've ever made of this group, I don't know what would be. But keep us in mind as you're doing your end of fiscal year or end of calendar year charitable giving, EIU is always worthy of your support.
Ken, it's Marty.
Yeah.
Just on the alumni giving rate, a school that is our size has the alumni profile that we have, and then, as you said, the sort of alumni satisfaction rate. Where would you expect, or where would you want our giving rate to be?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it, Marty, because I really should have talked about that a little bit more. The general trend overall among all universities, private and public, has seen a steady decline of alumni giving rates over recent years, and that mirrors a shift in the overall world of philanthropy that more dollars are being raised ever in North America for philanthropic causes, but it's coming from less donors. What's happening is the burden of giving is shifting up those giving ranges, and so development professionals are concerned about that because what we understand about the pyramid and the giving funnel is your six-figure giver today, not always, but often starts out as a three-figure giver 15, 20 years before that. And you keep them engaged through the funnel over time. They upgrade, their relationship or their connection to the cause grows. And so if we're not doing as good a job in the small gift categories, it can hurt us, we think, later in 5, 10, and 20 years out. Now, let's talk about specifically EIU and where we should be. When I worked at a private college, we considered 15 to 20% as a really good score for alumni giving rate. State regional universities, I think, would love to be north of 6%. And what I've kind of said is our intermediate goal is to, well, the first goal is reverse the trend. The first intermediate goal is 3.5%. I think we need to get to 5 to 6% as quickly as we can. But that's a great question.
And then just on the board giving, how many of those three boards, how many people is that?
Well, I'm going to give you rough math here. I think the foundation is around 15 to 20. The alumni board is 18. So that's 33. And then we've got 7 or 8. So that's north of 40 people.
So we got to find those 5 people that didn't give. Send them an email.
I think it was 4 folks. And
okay.
The inquisition has already begun. No, I'm teasing.
Good.
No, in each case, I shared with, near the end of the fiscal year, I shared with Chair Bauer, and I shared with the leadership, with the Alumni Association, with the foundation, folks who were outstanding for potential gifts, and I know that they were gracious in doing some personal follow-ups with folks. So, and I think that that's a culture now that we have on this board and on those 2 boards, that there's a willingness for some peer accountability to approach each other and say, even a symbolic gift is really important to show that we have, full support of these organizations and of the university.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it for the first section, unless there's other questions about some of the metrics and performance from the first quarter. We'll have a much better idea by the time of the January meeting, because December is typically a very large month for gift volume. There are a lot of donors who make their giving in November and December because they connect it to the calendar year. And so I'll feel a little more confident in making some predictions about how we're doing after 2 quarters of data. Okay, we'll move on to our next topic item.
Ken, this is Barb. I just wanted to say I appreciate seeing the numbers because we all know what you can't measure, you can't change.
Yes.
So I think it's important to keep these numbers in front of the board also.
And as over time, Barb, you'll see that I'm trying to grow out the dashboard of things to share. It's already grown. From last year, you always heard me just talking about donors and dollars, but now I want to talk about engagement and impact. And soon you'll also see, as we find ways to measure it, an understanding of the efficiency of our vehicles, of how we raise the money. So I think it's important for the board to understand how we get the money and then where the money goes when we get it, the impact that it has on the campus and on the university.
Ken, if I can interrupt you for just a minute, because our next topic is a naming opportunity, and in discussion with Chair Bauer before the meeting, she suggested that I talk for just a minute about what is the process relative to naming on our campus. And then we'll talk about a specific naming opportunity that will be an action item for later today. And I'm glad to do that. First of all, the authority to name any physical structure on our campus, that would be a building or a room, a laboratory, a hallway, a foyer, or anything like that, the authority to do so lies solely with the Board of Trustees. So the alumni office or the advancement office or the president or a department chair cannot declare, or a dean or anybody on our campus, declare a naming of a physical space on our campus. It is all regulated by an internal governing document that we have, and that document, I thought I had the number here, but it's 148.
Yes.
Is the internal governing document. And anybody can request a physical structure to be named. That is a community member, it is a faculty member, a student, the president, as well as the advancement office. And so when we talk about opportunities for naming, it often comes about, more often than not, from the advancement office, that they are working with our donors and our supporters and our business partners and industry partners. And in discussions of a gift to the university, in that honor of that gift, there is occasionally a naming opportunity that takes place. Sometimes the naming opportunity actually is requested by the donor or donors that might be involved with it. Sometimes it's our advancement officer. Sometimes it could be the president of the university talking to individuals. And when that name comes forward, and as I said, anybody can bring a name forward, that name goes to the university naming committee. And the naming committee reviews the request and discusses it, and they provide then a recommendation to the President's Council. The President's Council reviews that naming opportunity, and they provide a recommendation to the President. At any area, you can, this could be, slowed down or delayed or supported. When it comes to the President then makes his or her own evaluation and then can bring it to the Board of Trustees for their approval or rejection of approval for the particular naming. So the process is not just haphazard or random. There really is a process in place. There really is an authority that is given to the naming of any physical structure on campus. But as I said, many of these processes do start with our donors and our advocates and with our advancement officers as you're going to learn today in the opportunity that we have next. And so if there is any questions relative to that process, I'd be glad to answer them now. And if there's not, then we'll go on to the opportunity that we have today for naming.
President Glassman, can you touch specifically on Douglas Hall and where we are in that?
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. Relative to the suggestion, or that it was requested that this be brought to the naming committee. Again, anybody can make a request for naming a structure or renaming a structure. The committee has met one time at this point, and during the course of that committee meeting, I gave the charge to the committee to review the request and to seek out constituent responses as to what people are feeling about it, and then let them do their due diligence. The committee, I believe, has a second meeting coming up, and I think it is right after the Thanksgiving break.
Yes.
December 3rd comes to my mind, but
Yep.
I'm not sure if that's correct. These meetings are open to the public. In fact, during the first meeting, there was one individual from the public, I believe they were from Mount Zion, Illinois, and they wished to speak to the committee and talk to them about their thoughts or opinions or suggestions relative to the question of renaming. And so it is in its, essentially, if I would say, its infancy in the review process by the committee. Obviously, there's been no recommendation at this time. It's just kind of fact gathering is what they're going to be starting soon.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Very good. So I'm going to turn it back to Ken now and talk about the naming opportunity that will be recommended to the Board of Trustees today.
Thank you, President Glassman. The proposal for this particular naming emerged from the gift officers in the advancement area, as well as faculty and other friends of Glenn Hild, who were his colleagues and close friends in the art department. In your Board of Trustees booklet on page 5, there is a longer biography and description that talks about Glenn Hild and his impact and his legacy at EIU. I won't read that word for word for you. That's available to read. I think what I will share is that as I came to interact with this particular naming process and understanding Glenn Hild and his impact, I did not have the benefit of having been a colleague with him. He retired in 2016 and passed away in 2018. But it's clear that particularly in the art department and in the liberal arts group, that his legacy is, it's legendary. He rose through the ranks from the art department all the way up to eventually serving as an interim dean for what was then the College of Liberal Arts, I believe is the label for it then. And while he was still alive, and then even more motivated after his death, there was quite a push to recognize Glenn and his legacy in the department. The generosity of donors has yielded what will eventually become a $100,000 endowment to sustain this gallery over time. And as Paul and Sean can attest, whenever we can have an endowment that's willing to put off proceeds to keep a particular facility up to date, that takes pressure off of our operating our capital budget. So we're always grateful for that. The other note that I wrote to make sure to share with you outside of that is in the naming committee itself. The naming committee is made up of 7 individuals, 5 who are for the most part faculty, 1 staff member, and 1 student. And the level of support and the level of emotion in those discussions of this naming was evident. There was real warm feelings from those who had the great privilege to be Glenn's colleague. And so it'll be wonderful to be able to bring this forward as a potential action item later today. Does anybody have any questions about the naming opportunity for the Glenn Hild Student Art Gallery?
Will his family be there today? I mean, do you know if family's
I
coming?
know that Glenn's widow, Susan, is probably listening in this afternoon, if not to this morning's deliberations. I know for sure she's planning on watching the board meeting later today. Any other questions for that item? Okay, if we could go to the next slide. I just want to share a report from our two partner organizations or supporting organizations, the alumni area and then also the foundation. From the alumni area, we talked about the memberships going up. The association itself is working on updating their basic operating procedures. They wanted me to make sure I shared that the alumni magazine is due out in December. It's going to be an interesting mix of some stories and features on recent grads, so kind of the new, but also some special content celebrating the founding of EIU. So look for that magazine. We have put a lot of pressure on everybody involved to try to get it in everybody's hands before we get to Christmas. So look forward to that. As part of the program that Josh was discussing in the Gear Grant area, and then in addition to that, the alumni group and the Alumni Association is stepping up to get involved in those efforts for minority recruitment and in general recruitment. I think this is an untapped resource, and I know Josh Norman was surprised by how quickly we filled up his quota of how many alumni he thought would sign up to get involved in this, and so we're excited to be collaborating on that through the alumni. A lot of our alumni, if they're not ready yet to give financially, this is a way they can give back to their institution by helping us to recruit prospective new students. And in the alumni area, they lead our annual fund program, and so we have two pretty formidable direct mail campaigns that are about to go out. One is under the president's signature, a typical end-of-the-year message, and then we're doing more than 10,000 piece mailing under my signature that's targeted at never-evers, new donors, and also donors that haven't given in a while that we're attempting to recover. So we're hoping to move our stats on donors and donor acquisition and donor recovery with that piece. And we were able to do that by repositioning some of our budgeting in the area to focus on direct mail campaigns that will be a little more robust this December. And then the last piece from that area is that commencement is going to be virtual this year. So we'll on December 19th, the date of commencement, we'll be releasing our virtual commencement programming. But obviously with COVID, it's just not in the cards to be able to pull together a live commencement event. And so watch for more on that going forward. And then if we could move on to the EIU Foundation update. One fact I wanted to share from our meetings this fall with the Foundation Board, there's a portion of our endowment that is called the Student Managed Fund. This is actually a pile of real money that was funded by donors going back, I think, close to 2000. And ever since that time, EIU students in the upper level of finance courses have managed that portion of the endowment and made the investment choices for those particular dollars. And I'm pleased to report that the Student Managed Fund from January 1 of 2020 through the end of August grew by almost 20%. And their benchmark is the S&P 500, which only was up 10.8%, which is to say that Dr. Lynn and our students in that group are hitting it out of the ballpark. Now, our professional fund managers, the FEG group, will say, of course, that the students don't have the handcuffs on managing risk, but we're always excited to hear from the students, and the Foundation Board is very proud to see. And I think what is really significant is there's lots of students at colleges that are practicing in working in investments, but it's usually with pretend accounts. And our students are literally managing money on behalf of the university that then produces proceeds that supports our students in the university. So very fun stuff. And the balance on the Student Managed Fund as of September 2nd was $667,000. And I think that started way back with maybe 50 or 100,000 in seed money from donors, and they've grown it slowly over time. Let's see, we just completed this week our due diligence, our annual due diligence with the Fund Evaluation Group, FEG. That is our manager, investment manager for the endowment. And after that meeting and after discussion, our foundation board is continuing to retain our current spend rate out of the endowment, which is 5% each year. 4.25% of that spend comes to the campus, and the 0.75 is what allows us to be able to manage the operations of the foundation and be able to afford to have the Fund Evaluation Group help us. And they continue to provide us really good advice and are well respected among other higher ed institutions as a money manager for colleges and universities. Another piece of good news from the foundation is preliminary audit information for the foundation from fiscal 20, which just wrapped up, shows that the foundation's total assets are more than 100 and now, I believe, 101 million. And that's the first time we've crossed over 100 million in the history of the foundation. Remember, the assets of the foundation include the endowment, but they also include property they own, and it includes the farms that they are either owner or chief trustee for. And then lastly, from the foundation, we have some maintenance, some deferred maintenance that we're going to be dealing with at the Neil Welcome Center. And the foundation board is committed to deploying monies to make these happen. Roof replacement, I don't know if it's all of our windows, but a significant number of our windows will be replaced. And then a removal and replacement of the EIFS system. These are the some exterior masonry panels that in all three cases, the roof, the windows, and the EIFS system are contributing to a series of leaks in various places. So we're going to get all of that dealt with. How old is that building? It's close to 20 years, I believe. Is it? Was it built in 2002? I think we're at the 18th year.
Makes me feel old.
Yeah, it still feels new, feels when you walk in. But yeah, we were very much on the roof replacement time cycle. Yeah. And since we're dealing with that, and since the foundation has the ability, the cash to do it, all of these repairs, I think, total are going to be a little bit north of $200,000. And I think that's it for the alumni affairs area and for the foundation area, unless there's other questions.
Any questions for Ken?
Ken, you mentioned the need for, and obviously the role of major gift staff members. What is your current staffing? What are you approved for? And are you recruiting, or are you fully staffed? Where does that stand?
We're close to fully staffed. I'm actually satisfied with the number of staff we have in gift officer roles. There is one position that's being searched for right now. It's going to be a development director that will support the college vet. So they're in the middle of that search. Once we get that, I would consider us full up. I think what is our current handicap is COVID. I mean, the typical activity of a gift officer, particularly a frontline gift officer, is quite a bit of travel and face-to-face and shoe leather interaction with donors, and that's more difficult in COVID. But I'm really impressed with the creativity and the flexibility of my staff to use Zoom, phone calling. They're still maintaining contact with donors, and we still have very good 6- and 7-figure gifts in the pipeline in the proposal phase right now. So they're still working to the best that they can, but when we can get back out and run an open field, it's going to be better. Now, when I talk about gift officers, I describe a loose group of about 10 people. I consider the president a gift officer, consider myself a gift officer, but I also consider we have 3 development directors in our unit in the development team. There's another development director about to come on for education, so there's 4 development directors once we get that position hired. Athletics has a person dedicated to development, and then we have a whole additional bench of development people who I would consider the deans, the 7 deans, the 4 deans of the academic units and the 3 deans. So all of those folks are engaging to some degree in gift officer type work, but dedicated where their full-time job is to be a development officer will be at 4. Any other questions?
Thank you, Ken.
Anything? Yeah, thanks, Ken. Anything else for committee discussion this morning, President?
No, I think that concludes this portion of the morning's committee meetings.
Okay, then it looks like I will call the board meeting to order and Judy will take a roll. I couldn't hear Judy.
Ms. Bauer,
Here.
Mr. Dively,
Here.
Ms. Edwards, Ms. Edwards,
She's here, she's waving, she's muted.
okay, Mr. Hicks,
Here.
Ms. Madigan,
Here.
Mr. Perry,
Here.
Mr. Ruhack,
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Then I need a motion to go into executive session.
I'd make the motion
So
that
moved.
executive session meeting minutes, no, is this the one to go into executive session, or? Well, I jumped the gun. I'm so embarrassed. All right, never mind. I can make that motion if you want.
Would you please?
Okay, hang on. I can do it. You go, Joyce.
I move that the board convene an executive session to consider executive session minutes pending probable and immediate litigation and the employment of employees as permitted by Section 2C1, 11, and 21 of the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you, Joyce. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, then we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Dively,
Yes.
Ms. Edwards,
She's waving.
Mr. Hicks,
Yes.
Ms. Madigan,
Yes.
Mr. Perry,
Yes.
Mr. Ruhack,
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Okay, then we will go into executive session. As if you have the email that Laura sent out previously, we are leaving this Zoom meeting and you have a number to dial in. If for some reason you don't have that number, please text Laura and she will get it to you. And then we will start back into regular board meeting through Zoom at 1 o'clock. So at this point, we are leaving this Zoom and calling the number that Laura provided to us. Thank you, everyone, for the morning meeting. Any questions? Okay, see you or talk to you by phone in a few minutes.
I'm going out here.